Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Cori Desmond. Cori Desmond was born on March 18, 1980 at Torrance Memorial Hospital, where she immediately faced a life-or-death struggle due to a hole in her diaphragm. Despite the odds against her, Cori underwent multiple surgeries and defied a 20% chance of survival, not only recovering but thriving as well. Those who knew Cori described her as a bright, self-assured young woman who wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She was energetic, affectionate, and cared deeply for many people. After graduating from North Torrance High School, Cori earned a master's degree in criminal justice from Long Beach State. However, she later changed her mind and decided to pursue a teaching career. Sadly, Cori's life was cut short, but just a week after her passing, a notice arrived in the mail confirming that she had earned her teaching credential. Cori was loved by many and had a special gift for connecting with people. Cori had formed close bonds with her co-workers at various bars and restaurants, which made her want to continue working in the industry despite her family's disapproval. On Saturday, February 14, 2009, Cori finished her shift at a bar at 9:30 p.m. and walked 2 blocks to Street Lounge, a popular bar where many of her friends worked. Surveillance cameras captured her helping out her friends at the bar until it closed around 2 a.m. After that, none of her friends saw her again. 2 days later, on Monday, February 16th, at around 2:20 p.m., the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office received a call from a driver who was about 100 miles away from the bar where Cori was last seen. The driver had stopped to remove snow chains from his tires when he noticed a strong, unpleasant odor. Initially, he thought it was from an animal that had been hit by a car, but he decided to investigate. A short distance from his car, he found a black plastic garbage bag containing a woman's body. Panicked, the driver ran into the road, flagging down cars and asking someone to call the police, as his phone was out of PIN. The victim, 28-year-old Cori Desmond, was identified through fingerprints and her driver's license. She had suffered a brutal attack, dying from strangulation, with multiple bruises on her face and neck and head injuries. Despite her efforts to fight back, evident from defense wounds, she succumbed to the assault. Although the exact time of death couldn't be determined, experts estimated that Cori's body had been lying on the street for 12 to 36 hours before it was discovered. Notably, her pants were found unbuttoned and pulled down to her knees, but there was no evidence of sexual assault. Investigators concluded that the location where the body was found was not the site of the murder. The killer likely dumped Cori's body by the side of the road and hoping it would take time for it to be discovered. Before the police found her body, a rainstorm had washed away any potential evidence. Breaking the news to families of the deceased or missing is one of the toughest parts of a policeman's job. The news of Cori's body being discovered in a garbage bag was devastating for her grandmother, with whom Cori was living, and just as shocking for Mark, Cori's father. Mark was well aware of how the system worked and knew that investigations could be delayed for months due to the need for warrants for searches, interrogations, and fingerprinting. He also knew that bureaucratic red tape could slow down the process of solving a crime. Instead of waiting for the police to find Cori's killer, Mark decided to take matters into his own hands. Driven by his love for his daughter, Mark began searching for the person responsible. He discovered Cori's abandoned Jeep Wrangler in an alley near the bar where she worked. He also learned that Cori had gone missing on the night of February 15th, although no one had realized it at the time. Cori's grandmother hadn't been alarmed because Cori was an adult and could have stayed overnight at a friend's house. To piece together the events of the evening, investigators visited the bar where Cori worked as a waitress. They spoke with her co-workers, who revealed that Cori had finished her shift at 9:30 p.m. and then headed to another bar where her friends were working. This was a common routine for Cori. as she would often socialize with her friends and even lend a hand at the bar, earning extra tips in the process. Many regulars at the bar recognized Cori and thought she was a part of the staff. Security cameras confirmed this account, capturing footage of Cori assisting her friends behind the counter. However, on this evening, Cori's luck took a turn for the worse. She got into an argument with a drunk and disorderly man who was making inappropriate comments and inappropriately touching women. When a disruptive man showed up at the bar, Cori stood up for the other patrons and told him he wasn't welcome. The man became furious, but eventually agreed to leave. Cori went back to helping her friends and serving drinks as if nothing had happened, and even though she drank some alcohol that evening, it didn't seem to affect her behavior. After 2 a.m., Cori left the bar alone, planning to head home. But tragically, her body was found 100 miles away the next day. Mark helped the police by sharing any information he could find on TV and appealed to others to come forward with any crucial details. Meanwhile, the police identified the man who had gotten into a fight with Cori before her death. When questioned by investigators, the man claimed not to know Cori Desmond, but admitted to having a big fight with a woman at a bar on February 14th. He blamed his behavior on alcohol, saying it made him lose control, and confirmed that he was kicked out of the bar afterwards and went home to sleep. The man denied any involvement in the crime and agreed to take a polygraph test and let the police search his house and car. The investigators thoroughly searched the suspect's car, looking for any signs of evidence, such as bloodstains, hair, or personal belongings of Cori. Despite the car being dirty inside and out, forensic experts found nothing. They also searched his house, but found no indication of his involvement in the crime. The police then turned to a polygraph test as their last hope to catch the suspect, but he passed it easily, answering all their questions. His wife corroborated his alibi, stating that he returned home before 2 a.m. and went straight to bed. Since Cori left the bar around 2 a.m., it seemed clear that this man was not involved in her death. Consequently, the police removed him from their list of suspects, but they were left with no other leads or persons of interest in the investigation. Investigators looked into her personal life to see if she had any enemies who might have wanted to harm her. They discovered a strange detail. Cori had stopped by the bar where she worked to ask to use the restroom, but the owner refused since the bar was closed and told her to go home. This was around 2:20 a.m., but what happened after that remains unknown because Cori never got in her car and didn't go home. The investigators thought that Cori might have been abducted or attacked near her workplace, but the bar's security cameras didn't capture anything, and there were no witnesses on the street at that late hour. When Cori died, her blood alcohol level was more than 4 times the legal limit for driving, but it's unclear whether she was planning to drive or looking for another way to get home. Unfortunately, Cori didn't encounter anyone who could help her that night. A month into the investigation, the police had checked all leads and found no new suspects, reaching a dead end. However, Cori's father, Mark, was not ready to give up. He rented 3 billboards on Aria Boulevard in Redondo Beach. Information about Cori was displayed on 50 electronic billboards, which eventually led to a breakthrough in the case. In May 2009, the police received a call from a woman named Tiffany who had seen Cori's photo on one of the billboards. Tiffany's tip helped the police solve the case. She was clearly nervous and upset, speaking quietly and rambling at first. However, she eventually composed herself and explained that she thought her boyfriend, Tony Lopez Perez, might have killed Cori Desmond. She added that he had been acting strangely and that she would like to talk to them more about it in person. Tiffany arranged to meet with the detective in a park where she shared her suspicions. She told him that on Valentine's Day, she and Tony had planned a romantic dinner. She spent the evening getting ready, dropping off her kids at her parents' house, getting her hair done, and buying a new red dress, which Tony particularly liked. Tony was working that day, but was supposed to come home around 11:30 p.m. Tiffany waited up for Tony all night, but he didn't respond to her calls and messages. When he finally returned home at 4:30 a.m., he claimed to be too drunk to drive and said he had fallen asleep in his car. Tiffany found this suspicious, especially since Tony rarely cleaned his car, but afterwards, he suddenly bought cleaning products and washed the car thoroughly, refusing her help. A few days later, Tony sold his white Dodge for a low price and bought a new car without explanation. He also changed his phone number for no apparent reason. On their trip to Big Bear Lake, Tony's behavior seemed normal at first, but then he stopped the car and asked Tiffany if she thought the body of a murdered bartender had been dumped there. He seemed certain that the police had found her body in that exact location. Tony Lopez Perez and Tiffany had lived together for about 4 years and had a 6-year-old son, but they were never married. Tony was a hard-working and well-liked man with no criminal record. He came from a large family with 8 siblings, and his parents had grown up in the LA area. Tony had attended high school in Manhattan Beach. However, after Cori Desmond's death, Tiffany began to notice some suspicious behavior from Tony. He was absent on the day of Cori's death, and later he was seen cleaning his car urgently and trying to sell it quickly. He also made a strange comment about where the police found Cori's body. Additionally, he changed his phone number and displayed odd behavior. When Tiffany connected these dots, she realized that Tony might be involved in Cori's death. She was hesitant to believe it, but she agreed to cooperate with the investigators. They decided to interview Tony at his house, making it seem like a routine witness inquiry into Cori's case. Tiffany played along, not revealing to Tony that she suspected him. During the interview, Tony appeared calm and composed, answering questions without showing any nervousness. He claimed he didn't know Cori, saying he had only seen her in the newspapers. To gather enough evidence to arrest Tony Lopez Perez for Cori's murder, the police needed concrete proof. They tracked down the new owner of the Dodge that Tony had sold quickly after Cori's death was reported. The new owner confirmed that Tony had sold him the car at a suspiciously low price and allowed the police to search the vehicle for clues. Tiffany revealed that Tony had thoroughly cleaned the interior before selling it, but the police discovered something incriminating when they used luminol and an ultraviolet lamp to examine the car. This revealed why Tony had been to get rid of his car. The police arrested Tony and took him to the station, without revealing what they had discovered. Initially, Tony denied knowing Cori, but later changed his story, claiming he had seen her outside a bar and whistled at her. However, when the police showed him photos of a car he had sold, which contained crucial evidence, Tony's story changed again. This time, Tony claimed that Cori had become unconscious on the sidewalk outside the bar. He said he tried to help her, but she woke up screaming and told him to leave her alone. Tony alleged that, in fear, he covered her mouth and accidentally strangled her. Panicked that he would be blamed for Cori's death, Tony placed her body in the backseat of his car and drove home. He said he woke up in the middle of the night, checked on the body, and realized it wasn't just a nightmare. The next morning, Tony went to work with Cori's body still in the car. After his shift, he put the body in 2 garbage bags and abandoned it in a remote area. Tony claimed that he accidentally strangled Cori while drunk and scared, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Cori's injuries were severe, including head wounds, facial and neck bruises, and defensive wounds on her hands. Her pants were also found down to her knees, implying a more deliberate and violent act. Tony was arrested and charged with first-degree deprivation of life. He led the police to Cori's body the next day. The investigation produced DNA evidence, which matched Cori's blood to blood found in the car Tony sold shortly after the crime. At the 2011 trial, Coroner Jack Sheridan testified to the extent of Cori's injuries, including multiple head contusions, signs of strangulation, and blunt force trauma to her face. He also found scratches on her body, indicating that the killer had dragged her after death. Prosecutors argued that Tony had assaulted Cori, attempting to force her into sexual intimacy in the early morning of February 15, 2009. When Cori resisted, Tony strangled her. Tiffany Ware, a former girlfriend of Tony's, testified at the trial, revealing that Tony had an insatiable appetite for sex in January and February 2009. Despite their frequent daily sexual encounters, Perez remained unsatisfied. Additionally, Tiffany revealed to the court that Tony had forced himself on her without her consent on 2 separate occasions. These incidents took place about a month apart, shortly after the birth of their son. On both occasions, Tiffany was unconscious on the couch, having taken painkillers for severe back pain. Perez spoke to the court for the first time during his sentencing. He acknowledged that he had strayed from the values of love and respect he was taught, which normally made him a caring father, uncle, and family provider. He admitted that he failed to live up to these principles and fell short. Perez largely stuck to the version of events presented by his lawyer, Andrew Hanel, during the trial. According to Hanel, Perez found the victim, Cori, unconscious on the sidewalk and tried to calm her down, but didn't intend to harm her. Perez expressed regret, saying that he should have taken a moment to think before acting. Instead, he let fear take over and acted carelessly. Cori's father, Mark Desmond, mourned the loss of his 28-year-old daughter, who had a promising future ahead of her. He condemned Perez, saying that he not only took Cori's life, but also crushed the hopes and dreams of his own children. Mark Desmond described Perez as embodying the characteristics that women often fear in society. Before being sentenced, Perez asked God in court to show him mercy and apologized to both the Desmond family and his own family for causing them harm. He acknowledged that his actions would have a lasting impact on the Desmond family's lives. Desmond's grandmother, Beverly, expressed her desire for Perez to never be released from prison and to suffer as much as her granddaughter had. In July 2011, a jury found Tony Lopez Perez guilty of first-degree deprivation of life, resulting in a life imprisonment sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Cori Desmond's family thanked Tiffany, whose information helped the police solve the case. A family friend, Leslie Schwab, attended the trial and credited Tiffany with helping the police catch Perez, saying that without her, they might not have identified him as the perpetrator. The case of Tess Richie. Tess Richie was the youngest of 5 sisters, born on November 30, 1994. She spent her childhood in North Bay before moving to Toronto at the age of 19. According to her sister Verena, Tess loved her life, dogs, and family. She worked as a waitress in Toronto, but her dream job was to become a flight attendant and travel the world. Although Tess struggled to find a job she liked, her family was always willing to support her financially. Some sources suggest that after failing to find work at an airline or hotel, she began learning Italian and searching for job opportunities in Italy online. Tess also created content on YouTube, with her last video uploaded on February 23, 2014, nearly 4 years before the events we will discuss. In that video, Tess shared her personal experiences and the challenges she faced. Tess explained that she searched everywhere for someone who would understand and relate to what she was experiencing, but she never found that. She said her boyfriend's physical abuse is never acceptable, no matter how minor it may seem. She stated that he hit her, and even downplaying it as just throwing a purse at her is embarrassing because it happened in his bedroom, and it's a sad reality. After recording this video, Tess mentioned that she faced more personal struggles. In 2017, she experienced a devastating breakup with her boyfriend Julian on November 23rd. The next day, she turned to her older sister Rachel, who was not only 8 years older, but also her closest confidant. Tess recounted that she spent most of November 24th at Rachel's house in Toronto, where they discussed her breakup, went shopping, and visited a dog park. Rachel had to encourage her to eat dinner because she had lost her appetite due to stress. Despite her emotional state, Tess made plans to meet an old school friend, Riley Samar, that night. Samar was from North Bay, and she had moved to Toronto in the summer of 2017. They hadn't seen each other in years, but now that they were both living in the same city, they had started talking again. Samar suggested they go to Cruise and Tango, a well-known drag bar in the church in Wellesley area, that evening. Rachel's partner arranged for Richie to take an Uber to meet Samar downtown. Richie saw her sister Tess running out to catch the Uber, which was the last time she would ever see her alive. Richie arrived at the Cruise and Tango club around midnight, but Samar wasn't there yet. The club was packed, and Tess sent a text to her sister to let her know she had arrived safely. The next morning, Richie sent a text to her sister, not expecting a quick response since Tess had been out late the night before. However, by 6:30 p.m., Richie still hadn't heard back from Tess. She then discovered that none of her texts had been delivered to Tess's phone. When Richie tried calling, the calls went straight to voicemail. Their mother, Christine Hermiston, also attempted to contact Tess, but her phone was turned off. Christine got a notification that her daughter Tess had ordered an Uber at 4:02 a.m., but then the ride was canceled. This happened because Tess had used Christine's credit card to set up her Uber account, so Christine received updates on all of Tess's Uber rides. When Christine and her family couldn't reach Tess during the day and her phone stayed off, they started to worry because Tess always kept in touch with them. Rachel typically kept her phone with her at all times. On Saturday night around 9 p.m., she asked her partner to check on her sister's apartment in Scarborough while she reached out to her friends. Tess was still missing, and her family was growing increasingly worried. Rachel began calling hospitals and also contacted the police. By the following evening, the police had no updates for Tess's family. Multiple officers were assigned to search for Tess Richie, but no one had seen or heard from her in the past 2 days. On Monday, Tess's mother, Christine, and one of her sisters traveled from North Bay to Toronto to help with the search. They distributed flyers featuring Tess's picture, hoping someone might recognize her. The family did everything they could, but unfortunately, the police's investigation into Tess's disappearance was lacking. Meanwhile, Tess's friend Riley, who had gone to the bar with her that night, returned home safely. When asked about Tess's whereabouts, Riley mentioned that they had both been drinking heavily, which led to the bar's security asking them to leave. They left the bar shortly after 2 a.m. and headed to Wellesley Street to grab a bite to eat. On their way, they met a guy who decided to join them, but Riley couldn't remember his name. Once on Wellesley Street, they ordered hot dogs. Tess asked for a vegetarian hot dog, which led to a disagreement with the vendor. Tess thought she received a meat hot dog, and Riley noted that Tess accidentally sprayed mustard all over the vendor's cart. After that, Tess, Riley, and their new companion ran to Dundonald Street. There, they encountered a woman named Michelle on her porch and struck up a conversation that lasted about 20 minutes. Tess confided in Michelle about her recent breakup and how difficult it had been for her. Michelle offered her support, and they even exchanged phone numbers. Michelle observed that Richie seemed to be trying to enjoy himself, but when she looked into his eyes, she noticed a deep sadness. The breakup with Julian seemed to be affecting Riley heavily. Riley reassured her that things would improve and encouraged her to stay strong. At 4 a.m., Riley got a text from her boyfriend asking her to come home. She said goodbye to Tess and headed towards Yonge Street before going home. Tess felt let down that Riley had left so early. At 4:02 a.m., she ordered an Uber, suggesting that she decided to go home too after Riley left. The Uber driver arrived at 4:14 a.m., but Tess was not there. On Wednesday, November 29th, just a day before Tess's 23rd birthday, Christine began handing out flyers with her daughter's picture in the area where Tess was last seen. Since Riley had separated from Tess on Dundonald Street, Christine decided to investigate that area. She reached out to Anne Brazo, a nurse at St. Michael's Hospital, knowing their daughters had been friends since elementary school in North Bay. Together, they began searching for Richie as efforts intensified and social media campaigns aimed to find her. During this time, Brazo made a chilling discovery while looking into the bottom of an outdoor stairwell at a construction site located at 582 Church Street. She immediately recognized Richie's body lying on the concrete. "I was in complete shock, horror, disbelief. I couldn't understand what I was seeing," said Anne, fighting back tears. Feeling frightened, she noticed dust from a nearby gravel pile settled on Richie's body. Brazo let go of the staircase railing and stepped back down the gravel driveway toward Church Street. Meanwhile, Hermiston was further up the sidewalk, unaware that her daughter's body was so near. Brazo called out to her, "Christine, come back here. There's a girl in the stairwell. You need to come back." Hermiston turned and ran down the driveway, stopping suddenly at the stairwell. After a few moments, she began to scream, pleading with God for assistance. Tess's death presented a heartbreaking event for her entire family. They discovered her body only 300 yards from the bar where she had been before disappearing, and just 20 yards from the last place her friend Riley saw her. This situation raised many questions about the police's response, especially since her body had been found just a couple of blocks from the bar. After Anne and Christine located Tess's body, an anonymous police source shared new information with the media. It was reported that Tessa had advertised her intimate services online and had worked at a strip club. Tessa's mother stated that the Toronto police did not adequately search for Richie because they assumed she was an escort. This assumption was horrifying to Hermiston, who expressed her anger at the media's portrayal. After Richie's body was found, police sources claimed she was involved in the sex trade, which Hermiston called a blatant lie. They spread this information to suggest she led a high-risk lifestyle, deflecting blame from themselves. Although Tess briefly worked as a waitress at a strip club, she quit less than 2 weeks after starting. The mention of intimate services was linked to a dating site account, not a profession. Despite the discovery of Richie's body, the circumstances of her death remained unclear. Initially, police did not suspect foul play, but the homicide unit took over when an autopsy indicated she had died from neck compression. Additionally, they discovered seminal fluid on her clothing and saliva on her bra. DNA tests revealed male DNA, prompting police to begin searching for a suspect. Based on Riley's testimony, detectives aimed to identify the man Tess had met that night, as he was the person she spent time with after Riley went home. The police examined CCTV footage to gather information about that night. The video shows Tess and Riley leaving the bar and heading towards a hot dog vendor. There were also cameras on the building near where Anne discovered the body. After reviewing the recordings, the police observed Tess and an unidentified man walking hand in hand up the gravel driveway. According to the police, the camera captured Tess and this unknown man at 4:14 a.m. A subsequent recording taken 46 minutes later showed the man leaving the location alone, with no further footage of Tess. This led the police to consider him the main suspect in the Tess Richie case. On December 10th, during a press conference, the Toronto police released images of him obtained from the surveillance footage. They hoped that someone would be able to identify him. The police discovered the identity of the man after seeing the published images. He called the police station himself and stated that he was the guy in the photo. The person who was with Tess that night was identified as 21-year-old Colin Schlatter. In the fall of 2017, Schlatter was 21 years old and living with his parents and younger brother in their home in North Toronto. He had completed a year of postgraduate studies to become a car mechanic and was working with his father in construction. Schlatter, along with his parents and one of his lawyers, visited the police station where he spoke briefly with detectives but chose not to testify. But finally, they provided the police with important evidence. While still at the police station, Schlatter discarded an empty water bottle in a trash can. The police took the bottle and sent it for forensic analysis. After some time, they found that the DNA on the bottle matched DNA samples taken from seminal fluid and saliva found on Tess Richie's body, indicating that they came from the same person. Police planned an undercover operation to observe Schlatter for several weeks, but the DNA results sped up their timeline. Schlatter was arrested at approximately 11 p.m. on February 4, 2018, after watching the Super Bowl with his family at a cinema. He was taken to the 13th Division and placed in a holding cell at 3:19 a.m. on February 5th. Two other men were in holding cells next to him, both of whom were undercover police officers. Schlatter was unaware that he was about to provide them with a significant amount of evidence. The three men were in plain holding cells, each containing a combination toilet, sink, and bed. In the cell, Schlatter discussed his love for card games and claimed he had a knack for attracting women. He bragged about having slept with over 40 women, even though he was only 21. Schlatter did not encounter Tess and her friend Riley on the street. He saw them for the first time in the same bar where he was present. This recording was made just before security asked Tess and Riley to leave the bar. Schlatter also spoke to undercover officers about Tess. Initially, he claimed she was alive when he departed. However, he later suggested that something might have happened because alcohol had clouded his memory. He doubted his own capability. The police charged Ken Schlatter with the murder of Tess Richie, but he denied the accusation. In June 2018, police officers Alan McCullough and Michael Jones were charged with 2 counts of misconduct for neglect of duty under Ontario's Police Services Act. The report of hearing stated that they allegedly failed to thoroughly search the nearby property or immediate area, interview neighbors, and inform a supervisor. If they had followed protocol, Christine Hermiston stated, they would have found her. She was lying just around the corner. During the 2020 trial of Ken Schlatter, his defense argued that someone else could have approached the stairs where Tess was lying by climbing over the fence on the other side of the building, thus avoiding the cameras. The lawyers even named another suspect, but the police thoroughly investigated and interrogated this person, finding no evidence linking him to Tess's death. DNA evidence pointed to only one person, Ken Schlatter. Schlatter, a slight man who appeared soft-spoken in court, explained that he has a speech defect, causing him to slur his words and stutter sometimes. He claimed that Tess offered him a place to hide from prying eyes at 4:02 a.m., which explained the presence of his DNA on her belongings. Tess Richie had ordered an Uber, but when the driver arrived at the pickup point at 4:14 a.m., she wasn't there. Instead, Calvin Schlatter approached her again. They sat down on a bench at the corner of street. Schlatter stated that Tess seemed upset after their argument, so he went over to check on her. Schlatter claimed Tess asked him to sit and talk, but with no audio on security videos, it can't be confirmed. He said she was upset about her breakup, so he shared a similar experience to comfort her. Schlatter claimed that later, Tess asked if it was okay to kiss him. He said they stood up, hugged, and kissed each other. However, there is no footage of this kiss on the available CCTV footage. Schlatter claims that Tess Richie asked him to accompany her to the driveway at 582 Church Street and then down the outdoor stairwell. However, the prosecution questioned his motives, as an Uber driver was waiting for Tess at the time. It is unclear what Schlatter said to Tess to persuade her to walk with him into the darkness at 4 a.m. According to Schlatter, they kissed for a long time, and he ejaculated in his pants. He wanted to take things further, but Tess refused. Schlatter states that after this, he invited Tess to his house, but she declined and told him to leave. He claims that he left, and Tess was alive when he departed. There were only 2 people who knew the truth about the events of that night. Unfortunately, one of them had already passed away. During the trial, the prosecution presented 2 key witnesses, Riley, a friend of Tess, and Michelle Tepp, a woman who had spoken with Tess and Schlatter that night. Both Riley and Michelle identified Schlatter. In addition to talking to 2 undercover police officers, Schlatter is also alleged to have shared important details with a cellmate, known only as ES due to a publication ban, when they were both being held at a Toronto detention center for about 2 months in 2018. ES has a long history of criminal activity, including multiple break-ins and a domestic assault. The informant, who shared a cell with Calvin Schlatter, initially felt sympathetic towards Schlatter because he was a young man experiencing imprisonment for the first time. However, as time passed, his opinion of Schlatter changed. Schlatter would often cry himself to sleep, claiming he didn't want to serve his sentence and missing his mother. Despite this, Schlatter showed no regret when discussing the death of Tess Richie. According to him, Schlatter admitted to kissing Richie and losing control when she refused to go further, ultimately strangling her with a scarf. In court, Schlatter denied having these conversations with the informant, and his lawyer portrayed the informant as a deceitful liar. Nevertheless, physical evidence suggests that Richie was strangled, and only Schlatter's DNA was found on her clothing. In her final statement to the jury, defense attorney Lydia Riva presented her client, Schlatter, as a harmless and innocent young man. She acknowledged that it can be difficult to accept, but the criminal justice system is not infallible and can sometimes make mistakes. On March 23, 2020, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, and the judge sentenced Schlatter to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The trial was emotionally devastating for Richie's family and supporters, who were often left reeling and in tears in the courtroom. Tess's death has left the family feeling guilty and broken, struggling to look at each other. They're seeking $20 million in damages, including punitive damages, to ensure justice for their daughter. The case of Mindy Morganstern. Mindy Morganstern was born on April 29, 1984, in Bogota, Colombia. She was adopted by Eunice and Larry Morganstern, farmers from New Salem, North Dakota, USA, who already had a biological daughter named Rebecca. They had previously adopted a boy named Michael, and then, 10 years later, they adopted April, also from Colombia. When they discovered April had a younger sister, Mindy, they adopted her as well, making her their 4th child and 3rd adopted child. Growing up on the farm was ideal for Mindy. She enjoyed horseback riding, playing basketball, and helping her parents with farm work, including driving a tractor. After graduating from high school, Mindy left New Salem and moved to Valley City, where she thrived in student life. Her outgoing and cheerful personality quickly helped her make many new friends. Mindy was a dedicated student who balanced her studies with a part-time job as a waitress at a local restaurant. It seemed like she was on the verge of achieving her goals, but her life took a devastating turn. Mindy's friends and family noticed that she was unreachable on September 13, 2006, which was unusual because she was always quick to respond to calls and messages. Concerned about her whereabouts, her friends Tony and Danielle decided to visit her apartment to check on her. When they arrived, they saw her car parked in the lot, which indicated that she was likely at home. Danielle waited in the car while Tony went up to Mindy's 2nd-floor apartment. Despite knocking on the door, there was no response. Tony entered the dark apartment, stumbled upon a disturbing sight, and turned on the light to reveal Mindy's body with neck injuries. Overcome with shock, Tony ran outside to inform Danielle, still waiting in the car. Mindy's friends entered her apartment, but they were met with a disturbing scene. Mindy's neck had knife wounds, and an empty bottle of cleaning agent lay nearby, its strong smell permeating the air. Danielle quickly called 911 to report the discovery of her friend's body. As they waited for help to arrive, a neighbor from the same floor, who had been alerted by the noise, came to investigate. He approached Mindy, checked her pulse, and sadly announced that she had passed away. Soon after, the police arrived at the apartment. Upon entering, the detectives were immediately struck by the overpowering smell of the cleaning agent. They found Mindy's body lying in the living room, with a belt wrapped around her neck and a broken knife protruding from it. The handle of the murder weapon was found next to Mindy's body. In an attempt to destroy evidence, the killer used a cleaning agent, but forensic experts still managed to find crucial evidence, including skin particles under Mindy's left-hand fingernails, indicating that she fought back against her attacker. As investigators searched for a motive, they quickly dismissed the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. Mindy's purse, phone, wallet, and cash were all still present, untouched, and her jewelry remained unaffected. It seemed that the attacker's intentions were not financially driven. The presence of a basket of clean laundry near Mindy's body suggested that she was attacked immediately after entering her apartment. Furthermore, there were no signs of forced entry on the front door, implying that the killer either knew Mindy or entered the apartment shortly after she did. The next day, the detectives informed the Morganstern family that Mindy had passed away. The news brought grief to her parents, brother, and sisters. The family was confused, as Mindy was well liked by everyone and had no known enemies. Her friends had no history of trouble with the law. Mindy's friends, Tony and Danielle, revealed to investigators that they were not alone in the apartment. A neighbor from the same floor had entered Mindy's apartment after hearing their screams. He attempted to check Mindy's pulse, pronouncing her dead. When questioned, the neighbor explained that he had used the back of his hand to avoid leaving his fingerprints on Mindy's wrist. When questioned about the scratches, Robert Lind claimed they were work-related injuries, explaining that his job working with steel often left him with scratches. He said he had been at work from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. the previous day. The investigators verified his alibi by contacting his employer, who confirmed Robert's schedule and explained that scratches were a common occupational hazard. Despite this, the investigators remained skeptical and asked Robert to provide a DNA sample, which he willingly supplied. To aid in their investigation, the police sent a sample to the lab to compare it with the one found under Mindy's fingernails. They also questioned all of Mindy's friends, but no leads came from these interviews. Everyone claimed that Mindy didn't have any conflicts with anyone. While waiting for DNA results, investigators questioned Mindy's neighbors, including Mo Gibbs, a corrections officer from Barnes County Jail, hoping his professional insight might reveal something others missed. Gibbs claimed to have served in the Navy from 1990 to 1999, but was discharged due to an assault conviction and prison sentence. After release, he had no further legal issues. A former college security guard, Gibbs worked the night shift before Mindy's death. Next morning, Gibbs packed boxes into the car, preparing to move with his family. He noticed a strong smell of cleaning agent, but didn't investigate, being too busy with the move. Mo Gibbs had scratches on his hands, which he attributed to carrying boxes. When questioned about visiting Mindy Morganstern's apartment, he claimed to have been there only once to help her carry a laundry basket. Investigators requested a DNA sample from Gibbs, which he readily provided. After collecting the sample, the police released Gibbs. They then spoke with Mindy's co-workers at the restaurant where she worked, seeking information about anyone who might have known her well. They discovered that a frequent visitor, Ralph, who lived in a nearby trailer, made Mindy uneasy. The police decided to question Ralph, who denied knowing Mindy or having any conflicts with anyone at the restaurant. Ralph didn't have a solid alibi, but he did provide a DNA sample, which was sent to the lab for analysis along with the other evidence. The detectives then turned their attention to Mindy's boyfriend, Jordan Ram. Like Mindy, Jordan came from a local farming family, and they had been together for over a year. They met at church, where they were regular attendees. Jordan had a clean record and was well liked in the community. He appeared to be deeply committed to Mindy, often taking her to spend time with his family. However, Mindy's parents mentioned that Jordan would sometimes show up at their farm uninvited, asking Mindy to leave with him. This behavior hinted at jealousy, but Eunice and Larry didn't think he was capable of harming their daughter. The police asked Jordan to come in for questioning, and he readily agreed. During the interview, Jordan cooperated fully and answered questions honestly, trying to help the investigators in any way he could. Jordan claimed to have seen Mindy the day before she died, when they went shopping and visited a video rental store. The next day, Mindy called him at 10:45 a.m., which was the day she died. This was unusual because Mindy normally called Jordan around 10 times a day, but on this day, she didn't call again or respond to his attempts to reach out. Jordan told the police about his whereabouts at the time of Mindy's death, saying he was working on his family's farm. He agreed to provide a DNA sample and take a polygraph test, but his results were inconclusive due to his anxiety. The police let him go and sent his DNA sample to the lab while they checked his alibi. However, Jordan wasn't the only person in Mindy's life who raised suspicions. Kyle Kia, Mindy's ex-boyfriend, was another potential suspect. They had broken up over a year before her death, but something strange happened after their breakup. Kyle was the love of Mindy's life, and they had been together for 2.5 years. Kyle's family had loved him, and Mindy thought she would marry him one day. After their breakup, Kyle moved to a new place about an hour away from Valley City. Mindy was worried that Kyle would find someone else, which led to their breakup. According to Kyle, he ended the relationship because he needed to move on with his life. Mindy tried to win him back, but Kyle had already started seeing someone else and stopped communicating with her. About 7 months before her death, Mindy visited Kyle's house to talk, but he told her to leave. They hadn't spoken since then. When questioned by investigators, Kyle expressed regret over how he had treated Mindy. Kyle also revealed that Mindy had been in touch with his father, Rodney Kia, which was unusual. Mindy's friends said Rodney would call her several times a day, sometimes just a few times a week. Kyle thought his father was too attached to Mindy and had even asked him to stop contacting her. Rodney's wife was upset about the situation, as he was married. The police found a voicemail message from Rodney on Mindy's phone, left after her death, in which he apologized and cried. The police found the close relationship between Rodney and Mindy suspicious and brought him in for questioning. Rodney admitted his attachment to Mindy was strange, triggered when she dated Kyle and reminded him of his young wife. They started talking about Kyle, then discussed other topics, frequently texting even after his wife found out. Mindy often initiated conversations, sometimes up to 20 times a week. Rodney, who considered Mindy like a daughter, was shocked when he heard about her tragic fate. He left an emotional voicemail for the investigators, which, although sincere, didn't dispel their suspicions. In fact, it's possible that he became obsessively fixated on her. Despite his denials, Rodney provided his DNA to the police and accounted for his whereabouts on the day of Mindy's death, claiming he worked on the farm with his 2 sons from 7:30 a.m. until evening. His family corroborated his alibi, and the investigators released him. Meanwhile, the police sent his DNA sample to the lab for comparison with the skin particles found under Mindy's fingernails. Just as the investigation seemed stalled, a DNA analysis revealed a connection to a similar attack that had occurred in Fargo, 75 miles away, 2 years prior. In that case, a woman had been attacked and forced to make contact with her assailant. The DNA sample from the Fargo case matched the one found under Mindy's fingernails, suggesting that the same perpetrator was responsible for both crimes. The police investigating Mindy's case met with the Fargo victim to gather more information about her attacker. She recounted being drugged at a bar, waking up in an unfamiliar apartment, and barely escaping her attacker. She described him as a muscular African-American man, over 6 feet tall and weighing over 200 pounds. The police had previously entered the attacker's DNA into the federal database, but it had gone unmatched for 2 years. Now, with the new connection, they had a lead. After analyzing multiple DNA samples, the lab finally found a match: 34-year-old Mo Gibbs, a corrections officer at the Barnes County Jail, who had voluntarily provided his DNA sample. Detectives called Gibbs in for questioning, keeping him under surveillance in case he tried to flee. At the police station, they asked him to take a polygraph test, which he agreed to, but the results indicated he was lying. Gibbs denied any involvement in Mindy's death, remaining calm even after learning his DNA linked him to the case. However, the evidence was enough to arrest him and charge him with Mindy's murder. After Gibbs's arrest, 5 female prisoners came forward, accusing him of forcing them into intimate relations while he was on duty. As a result, he faced 6 additional charges. It was discovered that Gibbs had changed his name, previously being Glendale Morgan Jr. while serving in the Navy. He had been involved in a drive-by shooting and spent over 5 years in prison. Gibbs pleaded guilty to all charges except those related to Mindy's death. His defense claimed that his DNA was under Mindy's fingernails because she touched the same door handle as him, but the prosecution believed he entered her apartment, forced her into intimacy, and then killed her when she resisted. The judge deemed the evidence against Gibbs to be overwhelming and sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole. Gibbs also received additional sentences of 12 years for assault and 15 years for related charges. Although Mindy's mother publicly forgave Gibbs, she made it clear that she would never forget what he did to her daughter. Gibbs is currently serving his sentence at the North Dakota State Penitentiary. The case of Ashley Renee Lyons. Ashley Renee Lyons was born on July 21, 1985, in Scott County. She was active in the FFA program at Scott County High School, graduating in 2003. Ashley's brother Chris shared her passion for repairing cars, but her true interest was her boyfriend Roger McBee. After they broke up, Ashley discovered she was pregnant with his child. On January 7, 2004, Ashley learned she was having a boy and was overjoyed. She told her mom and brother about her plans to meet Roger and his parents at a restaurant and stamping ground. Despite her mom's offer to lend her car, Ashley opted to drive herself, saying she wouldn't be gone long. As she departed, her mom remembered her final words, "I love you, Mom. I'll be back soon." That evening, Chris received a call from Roger, who couldn't meet with Ashley and had tried calling her but didn't get an answer. When Ashley didn't return home by 8 p.m. and didn't answer her mother's calls, Carol started to worry. She called Roger's mother and learned the meeting had been canceled, sparking a frantic search for Ashley. Chris and his father searched for her, eventually checking Scott County Park, one of Ashley's favorite places. Ashley often visited Scott County Park with her boyfriend Roger, and later she would feed the ducks there on her own. The park is about 10 miles from Stamping Ground. One day, Chris and his father were driving around the park when they saw a car that looked like Ashley's. As they got closer, they realized it was indeed her car, with the engine running and the lights on. When they approached the car, Chris saw that the driver's side window was down, and Ashley was sitting inside with her head down. She was wearing a seatbelt but was unresponsive. Chris opened the door, shook her, and hoped she was just sleeping. But when he looked at his hand, he saw blood. He immediately called 911. Sadly, by the time Chris called for help, Ashley had already passed away, and the doctors couldn't save her. The devastating news soon reached Ashley's mom, who was overwhelmed with grief. The investigators arrived at the crime scene, and since Ashley's death was a result of a crime, her body remained in the car until the evidence was collected. At the scene, investigators found the car's engine running, the heater and radio on, and the driver's side window rolled down. A quick examination revealed the cause of Ashley's death. 3 9mm shell casings lay on the ground beside the car, and Ashley had sustained gunshot wounds to the head and neck. Despite a thorough search, the police were unable to find the murder weapon in the park. The unusual circumstances of the shooting suggested that Ashley was familiar with her killer. The fact that the window was down on a chilly night was suspicious, and the position of Ashley's body indicated that she had not attempted to defend herself or escape. From these clues, investigators concluded that Ashley knew her killer. The crime scene revealed that Ashley's wallet and phone were still in the car, leading investigators to quickly rule out robbery as a motive. The car's interior held a poignant clue: scattered ultrasound pictures, which Ashley had likely been looking at in the final moments of her life. At 5 months pregnant, Ashley's murder also claimed the life of her unborn son, Landon. This heinous crime was unprecedented in Scott County, and the community demanded that the police find the perpetrator. Ashley's parents told investigators she planned to meet Roger, the father of her unborn child, on the day she died. Roger was distraught, overwhelmed by emotion, and couldn't imagine who could harm his ex-girlfriend and their child. Investigators brought him in for further questioning. Roger told investigators he canceled a restaurant meeting with Ashley due to other meetings. He called her twice, but she didn't answer, so he called her home and asked Chris to have her call him back. Roger's account matched Chris's previous statement about Ashley's plans. Carol defended Roger, calling him a nice guy who got along with her family and not believe he'd harm Ashley and Landon. As investigators searched for clues, Ashley's family sought answers. Carol found her daughter's diary detailing daily life. One name stood out: Dina Williams, a classmate from a poor background, often wearing the same clothes. Initially, Ashley and Dina were friends, but their friendship deteriorated due to Dina's jealousy. Dina envied Ashley's possessions and relationships, including her romance with Roger. Ashley documented their multiple fights in her diary. Carol discovered this information from Ashley's diary and became suspicious of Dina's involvement in Ashley's death. After Ashley and Roger broke up, Dina quickly started dating Roger, which raised Carol's suspicions. Furthermore, Ashley's pregnancy with Roger's child might have motivated Dina to eliminate her as a rival for Roger's attention. Carol handed over the diary to the investigators, believing it held crucial evidence. The investigators also found Ashley's descriptions of her tumultuous relationship with Dina to be revealing. As a result, Dina was brought in for questioning at the police station, where she denied any role in Ashley's death. Dina, who worked at a bank, told investigators that she had an alibi for the evening of the crime. She was at an office party. Although she openly expressed her dislike for Ashley, especially because of her pregnancy, the lack of sentiment towards Ashley's death wasn't enough to detain her, so she was let go. The ballistic examination results revealed that the shooter was likely around 5 feet 10 inches tall. Since Dina was only 5 feet 5 inches tall, it seemed unlikely that she was the perpetrator. However, her twin brother Thomas, who matched the estimated height, had previously inquired about inducing a miscarriage, according to rumors. Moreover, people claimed that Thomas would do anything his sister asked. The investigators questioned Thomas, but he denied any involvement, and without evidence, they had no choice but to release him. Investigators' search for clues continued as Ashley's family prepared for the funeral, grappling with the unimaginable pain of losing 2 loved ones. During the autopsy, the fetus was removed from Ashley's body. Ashley and Landon were laid to rest together, a heart-wrenching gesture. The fact that the perpetrator remained at large added to the family's devastation. Ashley's parents offered a $3,000 reward, later increased to $5,000, for any information that could help catch their daughter's killer. This led to a flood of calls from people who thought they might have helpful information. One call in particular stood out. A woman who lived near the park where Ashley was shot reported that she might have seen the perpetrator. She described seeing someone running out of the park, jumping over a fence, and then getting into a red Chevrolet pickup truck that was waiting with its engine running. The truck sped away soon after. This crucial eyewitness account suggested that there might be more than one person involved in Ashley's murder. and that investigators should be looking for at least 2 suspects. The discovery of the red pickup truck led everyone who knew Ashley to suspect Roger, since he owned a similar vehicle. The police promptly took Roger's truck into custody and conducted a thorough search, but unfortunately, they found no incriminating evidence inside. The investigators decided to re-interview Dina and her brother Thomas. They started by questioning Thomas, who initially denied any involvement. However, after learning that a witness had placed Roger's pickup truck at the crime scene, Thomas became more cooperative. When asked if he knew who killed Ashley, he quickly replied that it was Roger McBeath. Thomas eventually made a deal with the investigators, trading his cooperation for a lighter sentence. He confessed to providing the gun to Roger, who then used it to shoot Ashley. Thomas also revealed that Roger had disposed of the weapon in Elorn Creek. After an extensive 6-hour dive search, the police finally found the gun, which was later confirmed through ballistics testing to be the murder weapon. The investigators initially suspected Dina of being the shooter, but they soon ruled her out due to a discrepancy in height. However, during further questioning, Dina revealed that she was the getaway driver on the night of the crime. This led to the arrests of Roger McBeath, Dina Williams, and her twin brother Thomas. It was clear that Roger was motivated by his desire to avoid becoming a father. Ashley, on the other hand, was excited to become a mother and had the full support of her family. Roger devised a sinister plan to eliminate the problem. He lured Ashley to Scott County Park under the pretense of a meeting with his parents at a nearby restaurant. Dina drove him to the park, where he approached Ashley's car with a gun. As Ashley rolled down her window to show him ultrasound pictures, Roger shot her 3 times, killing her and their unborn child. He then fled the scene in the pickup truck, escaping with Dina's help. The perpetrators stopped and got rid of the gun by throwing it into the river. Roger McBeath denied any involvement. Thomas Dina, on the other hand, was sentenced to 7 years in prison for his role in the crime. As part of his plea deal, Dina admitted to accepting $11,000 from Roger to harm Ashley and cause her to have a miscarriage. Although the plan was never carried out, Dina agreed to give Roger the gun used in the murder, according to court records. In 2005, Dina Williams pleaded guilty as part of a plea deal. The prosecutors recommended that she serve a total of 20 years in prison, making her eligible for parole after serving 17 years of her sentence. Prosecutors planned to call witnesses who would testify that Dina wanted Ashley dead, conspired with Roger to poison her, and even offered $1,000 to cause a miscarriage. When these plans failed, they turned to more extreme measures. Dina claimed her public defender warned her she'd likely be found guilty. She was distressed, saying she pleaded guilty to something she didn't do. Dina admitted driving Roger to the park, but said she drove around the subdivision while they met and later returned to pick him up. During her drive, a woman heard 3 gunshots, but at the time, she didn't know what they were. Dina, who was involved in the events, stated that Roger had planned something without her knowledge. Later, he called Ashley on his phone, telling her he loved her and was sorry he missed meeting her at the park. The jury listened to a recording of this message during Roger's trial. According to Dina, when she left the park, Roger never mentioned that Ashley was dead. Dina also claimed that she didn't report the incident to the police because she was afraid of Roger, who she said was abusive towards her. Dina Williams said she was terrified of Roger, who threatened to kill her. She expressed regret and sympathy for the Ashley family. However, Roger's parents disputed her testimony, calling her a compulsive liar who acted impulsively. They accused Dina of being jealous of Ashley and taking a plea deal to avoid responsibility. Dina was sentenced to 20 years in prison, released on parole in 2021, and claimed she was young and influenced by Roger at the time of the crime, denying knowledge of his relationship with the victim. During her time in prison, Dina participated in various rehabilitation programs, including anger management, legal aid training, horticulture, and Braille transcription courses. Roger's initial murder conviction was overturned in 2009 by the Kentucky Supreme Court due to illegally obtained evidence. The court ruled that prosecutors had used evidence from an unauthorized jail informant who had engaged in casual conversations with Roger, hoping to elicit incriminating statements. The informant had exceeded his authorized role, leading to the conviction being overturned. Roger later pleaded guilty to being an accomplice to murder and tampering with evidence, and was sentenced to 42 years in prison, with the possibility of parole in 16 years. He also received a concurrent 5-year sentence for evidence tampering. At his 2023 parole hearing, Roger expressed remorse for his actions, stating that he didn't deserve parole and was truly sorry for what he had done. He wanted to apologize to the family of Ashley Lyons, the mother of his child, whom he had loved deeply. Although he acknowledged his daily regret, his parole eligibility was declined and the hearing was discontinued. Roger remains in prison. In memory of Ashley, an angel garden with ceramic angel statues has been created at Scott County Park, where she tragically died. After Ashley's death, Carol and her husband Buford Lyons worked to pass a law that recognizes violence against a pregnant woman as 2 separate crimes, one against the woman herself and another against her unborn child. This law was passed at both the state and federal levels. The case of Alicia Canales McGuire. Alicia was born on October 29, 1992, in Mount Vernon, Washington, to Manuel and Michelle Canales. Her passion was helping others, which led her to work as a caregiver for most of her adult life. Growing up on a farm, Alicia learned the value of hard work from a young age. Starting to work at just 5 years old, she often returned to the family farm to lend a hand. Spending time with her family was crucial to Alicia, and she made it a point to regularly visit and call them, always remembering to express her love when saying goodbye. Alicia lived in Birdsview with her husband Brattle. Alicia lived in the house her sister Amanda's home, where Amanda lived with her 3 children. When Amanda had to travel to New York for work, she asked Alicia to watch her kids during her absence. Alicia was happy to help care for her nephew and nieces. One night, a nanny staying in the house with her called 911 after waking up to the sound of gunshots. When the nanny went downstairs, she found Alicia lying motionless at the front door. The police officers who arrived at the scene first secured the house to ensure the perpetrator was not still inside. They carefully checked every room, confirming that only the nanny and the children were present. Once the children were safely removed from the house, the police began searching for evidence. A car was parked in front of the house, with shell casings nearby, indicating that the shooter had stood next to the car right before the front door. Several bullets had hit the door frame, and Alicia's body was lying face down just outside the door. The police found no signs of a robbery, as the house was not in disarray, and it appeared that the perpetrator had not entered the house at all. The detectives were left wondering who would want to kill Alicia and why. When they discovered that the crime scene was her sister's house, they considered the possibility of mistaken identity. Maybe Amanda, Alicia's sister, was the intended target, but she was safely in New York at the time. The investigators turned to the nanny, who was also in the house during the shooting, for answers. After calming down, she was able to provide some information. She told them that she was upstairs when she heard the gunshots, and when she looked down, she saw Alicia lying face down on the floor, motionless. Unfortunately, she didn't see the shooter. She mentioned that Amanda, Alicia's sister, had issues with her ex-husband, Kevin Lewis. Upon reviewing reports from the local sheriff's office, the detectives discovered that this was not the first call to the address, with all previous incidents related to domestic disputes between Amanda and Kevin Lewis. The detectives focus on this particular testimony. They located Kevin Lewis's home address in another part of Everett and paid him a visit before dawn. His house was dark, and when they knocked on the door, Kevin answered. During their conversation, the officers asked if he knew where his ex-wife was, and he replied that she should be at home. Appearing disheveled as if he had just woken up, the detectives asked Kevin to account for his whereabouts the previous night. He claimed to have stayed at home and stated that his sister and mother could vouch for his alibi. Notably, he didn't ask why the detectives were visiting him. When detectives told Kevin that a shooting had occurred at the house where his children lived, he showed no emotional response, which was unusual. As a parent, he should have asked about his children's well-being, but he remained silent. However, when they informed him that Amanda was out of town on business, he expressed surprise, saying "really," and the conversation ended there. The detectives decided to investigate further by reviewing footage from surveillance cameras at neighboring houses. They wanted to verify Kevin's alibi that he had stayed home all night. They saw a car stopped near Kevin's driveway about 40 minutes before the attack on Alicia. A person resembling Kevin then exited the house, got into the car, and drove away a few moments later. Although the footage was not clear enough to confirm it was definitely Kevin, the detectives continued to review additional camera footage. They took a closer look at the car, but that didn't help identify it. All they could determine was that it was a light-colored vehicle. They fast-forwarded the recording and saw the car return about 20 minutes later. This time, they noticed a crucial detail. The front right rim was different from the others. While the three other rims were light in color, the front right one was dark. The car stopped near Kevin Lewis's house, and the same person who had gotten out of the car earlier got out again and went back inside. Whoever this person was, they entered the house about 20 minutes before the 911 calls about a shooting started coming in. After that, the car left and didn't come back. Since it was a 15-minute drive from Kevin's house to Amanda's house, it's possible that the car had enough time to get to Amanda's place. However, it was too early to say whether this car was involved in the shooting at all. Amanda found out about her sister's death a few hours later, when their father called her in New York to break the news. When investigators asked Amanda, a key witness, if she thought her ex-husband Kevin was responsible for Alicia's murder, she was adamant that he was the one. Although Amanda's 8-year marriage to Kevin Lewis ended, she struggled to acknowledge the toxic nature of their relationship. Despite their divorce in June 2017, Amanda lived in fear of Kevin, who had physically abused her in the past, leaving her with bruises. After their separation, Kevin continued to threaten her. In August 2017, Amanda was granted full custody of their 3 young children, and Kevin was ordered to provide $800 in monthly support instead of child support. This marked a fresh start for Amanda, who focused on rebuilding her life in Everett, Washington, and was grateful for the support of her family as a single mother. Kevin, a former military man, threatened to kill Amanda, and she took him seriously due to his training. Believing she was the target, Amanda obtained a restraining order against Kevin, but he violated it multiple times. He would often lurk around her house, peeking through the windows, which terrified not only Amanda, but also her 3 children. Despite the violations, Kevin was never charged by the police. Weeks before her sister's tragic death, Amanda was brutally beaten in her own driveway. She was getting out of her car late one night when someone launched a surprise attack. Although the assault happened quickly and she didn't see the attacker's face, Amanda was convinced that Kevin was behind it. Investigators believe 30-year-old Kevin Lewis is the prime suspect in the murder of Alicia. They think he intended to kill his ex-wife, but he was unaware that she was in New York at the time. Unbeknownst to him, Amanda had asked Alicia to babysit her children while she was away. However, there's a problem with this theory. If Kevin was the person in the footage, it would mean he was at his home during the shooting. Moreover, His sister and mother have provided him with a solid alibi. As a result, the police have continued their investigation, exploring alternative explanations for the crime. They returned to Amanda's house to re-examine the crime scene and track the path of the bullets. The investigation revealed that Alicia was shot when the door was only partially open. The shooter fired at least 7 shots from outside the house, which entered the interior. The evidence suggests that the shooter stood next to the garage and fired, then moved towards the door and fired again from inside. The medical examiner determined that Alicia died from multiple gunshot wounds to the head and torso, with 5 shots hitting her. 2 of the wounds showed signs of gunpowder residue, indicating close-range shots. While the examiner couldn't determine the exact order of the 5 shots, they believe the last 2 head wounds were likely the final 2 inflicted. Furthermore, experts concluded that the 7 shell casings found at the scene came from the same gun. Alicia's head wounds were caused by close-range bullet shots. The investigators explored the possibility of a personal motive behind her murder, but found no evidence to support this theory. The shell casings discovered at the crime scene were a rare Russian-made brand called Tul Ammo, which gave the police hope of tracing the seller and buyer. The police learned that Walmart had sold the 9mm Tul Ammo cartridges and had CCTV footage of the purchase. Upon reviewing the footage recorded 2 days before Alicia's death, they initially suspected Kevin Lewis as the buyer. However, the footage revealed a different person who paid using a credit card. The police identified this individual, but found no connection to Kevin Lewis, Alicia, or the nanny. The investigation thus required new leads and evidence. Amanda was questioned by investigators about her relationship with Kevin. She revealed that their relationship started well, but Kevin eventually became aggressive and violent, leading to their divorce, a restraining order, and Amanda gaining full custody of their children. Despite this, Amanda believed that she was the intended target of the shooting that killed Alicia, not Alicia herself. She suspected that Lewis had orchestrated the attack, but investigators knew that Kevin was at home at the time of the shooting. Upon re-examining the footage from the night of Alicia's death, investigators noticed something they had previously overlooked. The low-quality recording showed Kevin leaving his house and getting into the back seat of a car behind the driver. This raised questions, as most people would typically sit in the front passenger seat. The likely explanation was that someone else was already sitting in the front passenger seat, meaning there were probably 2 people in the car by the time it arrived at Kevin's house. This new evidence didn't directly link Kevin to Alicia's death, but it did contribute to the growing case against him for attacking his ex-wife Amanda. In November 2018, Kevin was arrested and later sentenced to 3 years in prison. Over a year had passed since Alicia's tragic death, yet her case remained a mystery. However, a breakthrough finally came in 2019 when the police station received a crucial call from a woman with vital information. The caller claimed to have met a girl named Angelica at a party in nearby Spokane, who boasted about being hired to commit a murder on York Road, the same road where Alicia was fatally shot. Although the police were initially skeptical, given the significant distance of 5 hours between Spokane and Everett. According to the caller, Angelica had proudly shared details about how she and her boyfriend were involved in the crime. Alexis Hale, alias Angelica, claimed a woman was fatally shot in the head, saying the killer was hired by the children's father and mistakenly targeted the wrong person. Police were interested in her detailed knowledge of the case. They discovered her true identity, found social media photos of her with a 9mm pistol, and videos featuring her boyfriend, Jaden Phelps. A video posted by Alexis on the night of the murder helped investigators pinpoint her location, about 10 minutes from Kevin Lewis's house. Jaden boasted about a large sum of money on social media, leading police to discover his connection to Kevin through his aunt. With this evidence, they made an arrest. The first person to be taken into custody was Alexis Hale, who protested loudly claiming she was only 17 and couldn't be arrested. However, she knew why she was being arrested and demanded a lawyer. Police arrested Jaden Phelps, analyzing his and Hale's phone records, showing they drove from Spokane to Everett to commit the shooting. Security footage from Lewis's neighbors revealed someone in a white top leaving and returning around the time of the crime. Lewis was wearing a white top when questioned. Phelps, in custody, revealed Kevin Lewis hired him and Hale and led police through the crime scene, pointing out the door and corner. He stood where he was positioned during the crime, reenacting the events, and admitted to shooting at the door when it opened slightly, then firing 2 more shots before fleeing. Kevin Lewis was already in jail for a crime when he was arrested and charged with aggravated murder with a firearm, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder in connection with the September 2017 death of Alicia. In July 2020, 20-year-old Phelps pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder and was sentenced to 31 years in prison. His co-defendant, 18-year-old Hale, also pleaded guilty to the same charge and received a 15-year sentence. During the trial, Phelps testified that he committed the crime for financial gain and to increase his reputation on the streets. He used the money Lewis paid him to get tattoos, purchase a pair of Timberland boots, and buy a Ferragamo belt buckle. Phelps claimed that his former girlfriend had obtained the gun used in the crime from a family member, and he had given her $200. Lewis pleaded not guilty and faced trial. Prosecutors alleged he paid $2,400 to his cousin and girlfriend to kill his ex-wife, but they mistakenly targeted Alicia. Lewis directed them to the address, claiming he didn't know the target. Phelps and Hale exited their vehicle, with Phelps stopping near the garage and Hale knocking on the door. As Alicia opened it, Phelps fired multiple shots, eventually walking up to the porch, and they fled. They returned, fearing they left a glove, but saw police and drove away. Finally, Judge Thompson also ordered Lewis to no longer have any contact with his ex-wife, his children, and Phelps and Hale for the rest of his life. Records indicate that he remains incarcerated at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla County. The case of Vera Peka. Vera Peka was born on September 24, 1997, in Kelos, Kovo Oblast. She grew up to be a cheerful, creative, and talented individual who excelled in singing competitions during her school years. Despite her parents, Oksana and Yvonne, divorcing while she was still in school, Vera maintained a good relationship with both of them and their new partner. People who knew her described Vera as kind, positive, and avoiding conflict. After graduating from high school, Vera surprised her family by enrolling in the State Technical University in Kovo instead of pursuing a career in the arts. Her mother, Oksana, lived in Kisilov, about 110 miles from Kovo, and Vera would visit her during her free time. During one of these visits in 2016, Vera met Vladislav Kanyus, a young man her age. Vladislav was her opposite in many ways. He lacked direction, was introverted, and had a quick temper. He had dropped out of school after 9th grade and came from a troubled home. His mother had abandoned the family, leaving him to live with his father, who had legal problems and eventually took his own life in front of Vladislav. This traumatic experience had a lasting impact on Vladislav's life. Vera and Vladislav's relationship was unlikely, as they had little in common. Despite this, Vera fell in love with him. However, her parents were strongly opposed to the relationship due to Vladislav's troubled past. They wanted a better life for Vera and disapproved of her choice. Vera's mother, Oksana, stated that they waited for Vera to end the relationship, but instead, she stopped talking about Vladislav with them. Vladislav was never invited to family gatherings and did not appear in Vera's social media photos, making it seem like she was hiding him. In 2019, Vera and Vladislav moved in together in Kovo, with her parents helping to pay for the apartment. Although Vladislav was unemployed, and had no intention of changing that. He enjoyed living with Vera, who was beautiful, smart, and financially stable. As a result, she supported him. The relationship was tense, and Vladislav's alcohol abuse was a major concern. Vera's parents suspected that Vladislav was physically abusing her as well. Vera ended her toxic relationship with Vladislav in November 2019 with the help of her parents, who assisted her in paying for a new apartment. Logically, Vladislav should have moved out, but he refused to do so, as he enjoyed living at someone else's expense. According to Vladislav's testimony, he and Vera had a fight on December 15, 2019, because he wanted to go to a nightclub, but she declined. Vladislav claimed that during their relationship, Vera began to distance herself from him, often traveling to Kalos, and eventually admitting to communicating with someone else. Keep in mind that this is Vladislav's testimony, and it's up to you to decide how credible his words are. According to Vladislav, a month before their breakup, Vera told him she was leaving him. Later, he found out from a mutual friend that she was already seeing someone else, a guy named Alexander from Selos. He didn't know Alexander personally. After learning this, he wanted to talk to Vera about it. They were still living together in the same apartment at the time. On December 15, 2019, they had a fight and she left, taking some of her things with her. Even though they weren't together anymore, they stayed in touch by phone. On January 12, 2020, he called Vera and offered to help her move her remaining belongings to a new place. She agreed, and they planned to meet up the next day to do the move. When January 13th came around, Vera showed up, and they packed up both her stuff and his, since he was planning to move out of the apartment too. He didn't want to stay there without her. On January 13th, 2020, Vladislav and Vera consumed beer, lure, and vodka while packing. They both became intoxicated. Despite their inebriated state, they did not argue during the drinking session, which continued until 5 a.m. on January 14th, 2020. However, a conflict emerged when Vladislav brought up their relationship and suggested they get back together. He also confronted her about seeing another guy, which Vera denied. This led to an altercation, during which Vera became aggressive, swearing, insulting, and physically attacking Vladislav. She kicked him in the groin area at least 5 times and slapped him in the face at least 8 times. Although he didn't feel pain from the slaps, the kicks caused him physical discomfort. Vladislav claimed that Vera's aggression was triggered by his discovery of her infidelity, which made him angry. Vera, on the other hand, accused him of prying into her personal life and continued to insult him. This is the version of events as told by Vladislav to the police. However, there are reasons to believe that Vladislav's testimony may not be entirely truthful. Vera was determined to move out of the apartment she shared with Vladislav and wanted no part in drinking with him. She asked her friend to assist her with the move and sent a voice message at 5:08 p.m., saying she was already packing her belongings and would be at her new apartment by 6 p.m. She requested her friend's help in transporting her belongings from the taxi to the new apartment. However, just 3 minutes later, Vera sent another voice message inviting her friend to come to her current apartment to help with the move. But before she could finish, Vladislav intervened, stating that no one was allowed in the apartment, effectively blocking her friend from coming. The situation was escalating, and at 5:15 p.m., Vera sent a quiet, low-voiced message to her friend, seemingly a distress call, as she attempted to keep it from Vladislav's ears. 10 minutes later, at 5:25 p.m., Vera sent another voice message, but this time Vladislav's voice could be heard, instructing Vera's friend not to bother them and to wait for Vera to text her. By 7:19 p.m., Vladislav had taken control, sending a voice message himself. From that point on, Vera was silenced, and her friend no longer heard from her. It seemed that Vera was trapped alone with Vladislav. The night took a dark turn when, at around 3 a.m., the neighbors on the same floor were awoken by blood-curdling screams coming from apartment 738. A bystander described the unfolding tragedy as a massacre. The screams from the apartment were so loud that 15 people, including Vladislav's brother, gathered in the hallway. Vladislav's brother recalled his brother's previous threats to harm Vera and realized they needed to intervene. Since the door was made of iron, the neighbors searched for tools to pry it open. Meanwhile, Vera's desperate cries for help continued to echo from the apartment. The bystanders called the emergency service multiple times, but their calls were ultimately part of a separate investigation. Despite the repeated calls, the police failed to arrive for 30 minutes until 6:30 a.m. During this agonizing period, the neighbors made 7 emergency calls, but no help came. The last words they heard from Vladislav were, "Vera, forgive me, I love you very much." Finally, the neighbors found a crowbar in a nearby parking lot and broke down the door. Tragically, they found Vera dead and Vladislav, who was heavily intoxicated, in the bathroom. Meanwhile, the 112 operators were indifferent to the emergency calls, chatting, laughing, and drinking tea, complaining about being disturbed as Vera lay dying at the hands of her former boyfriend. The police did not arrive at the scene until after Vera's death had been reported. They later justified their delayed response by claiming that one of their patrol cars had no gas and that all available officers were busy handling other emergency calls. As a result, the operators who handled the 112 emergency calls and the police officers on duty that night were also put on trial. A police station video was made public, showing officers displaying a shocking lack of urgency. Vladislav Kanyus initially claimed that he and Vera didn't have any conflicts until 5 a.m., but forensic evidence disputed this, showing that he had lied. In reality, Vera's first injury occurred around midnight, which meant that Vladislav had brutally beaten and injured her for 6 hours before she eventually died. The autopsy results were shocking, revealing a total of 100 injuries on Vera's body, including stab wounds, a broken nose and ribs, and evidence of strangulation around her neck. The community was outrageously upset, and more than 1,000 people attended her funeral, exceeding the church's capacity. Vera's mother, Oksana, was left devastated by the unrecognizable state of her daughter's body, which required an extensive 4-hour restoration process at the funeral home. At the same time, Vladislav was providing a false account to investigators, trying to downplay his role in the vicious crime. The indictment alleges that the police officers were negligent in their response to the situation. They had access to gasoline, but even if they didn't, they should have taken necessary steps to resolve the issue. However, they didn't treat the situation as urgent and failed to take prompt action. Furthermore, the 2 police officers refused to cooperate with the investigation and denied any wrongdoing. Their defense was that when witnesses reported the screams and cries for help, the investigation team was already occupied at a different location where a corpse had been discovered earlier. In 2022, Vladislav Kanyus was sentenced to 17 years in prison after admitting partial guilt. He was also ordered to pay $45,000 in compensation. Vera's parents were shocked by the leniency of the sentence and planned to appeal. However, Vladislav didn't serve his full sentence. In April 2023, it was discovered that he had received a presidential pardon after serving just 6 months in prison. Furthermore, photos of him in military uniform surfaced online in November 2023. Vladislav Kanyus, the person responsible for Vera's death, was not only pardoned, but also relieved of the obligation to pay compensation to her parents. The news sparked widespread outrage in Russia. The press secretary of the Russian president explained the pardoning procedure, stating that it involves a series of steps. First, the convict must confess to their crime. Then, the request for pardon is reviewed at multiple levels, including the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Regional, Federal District, and Central Commission, before reaching the president. Alternatively, convicts can also redeem themselves by fighting on the battlefield, where they risk their lives under fire. This alternative path to redemption is difficult to accept, especially for Vera's parents, who were devastated to learn that Conyus was free to start anew while their daughter would never have that chance. The case of Brandon Duran. Brandon Duran was born in 1980 in San Diego, California, to a father who was a passionate motorcyclist and a former member of the Bandidos Motorcycle Club, considered a criminal organization by the FBI. When Brandon was around 10 years old, his parents divorced, but they maintained a good relationship and shared responsibilities in raising their son. Brandon inherited his father's love for motorcycles and at 25 built his own bike from scratch, which became a treasured possession. He socialized with other bikers but never joined a motorcycle club. However, his life took a dramatic turn when his father unexpectedly passed away in April 2005, plunging Brandon into depression. To overcome his grief, Brandon decided to make a change in his life and embarked on a road trip to Las Vegas on his motorcycle. During his year-long stay in Vegas, he met Amber Andrews, 24, and they fell deeply in love. Their whirlwind romance led to marriage just 2 months later, and Amber became pregnant soon after. In December 2006, Amber gave birth to their son, Brando. The arrival of his son marked a significant transformation in Brandon's life. He became a devoted father and husband, prioritizing his family over his personal interests and securing a high-paying job. Amber failed to prioritize her new role as a mother, instead continuing to frequent biker gatherings and parties. This led to a rapid deterioration in the young family's relationships, with fights becoming increasingly common. The inevitable outcome was divorce, filed just 4 years after their wedding. Brandon was granted full custody of their child due to his ability to provide for himself and his son, unlike Amber. After the divorce was finalized in 2010, Amber returned to her hometown in Oklahoma, while Brandon went back to San Diego with their son. There, he was reunited with his family, who helped him raise his child. As time passed, Brandon's emotional wounds from the failed marriage began to heal, and he became optimistic about the future. However, in the summer of 2012, Amber unexpectedly showed up at his doorstep, asking for a second chance at their relationship. Brandon's long-suppressed feelings resurfaced, and he chose to believe in Amber's sincerity, agreeing to give their relationship another try. With their son Brando set to start kindergarten in September, Amber requested that the three of them visit her parents in Oklahoma, who were eager to see their grandson. Brandon consented, and they began preparing for the trip, planning to stay in Oklahoma for about a week. A few days before Brandon, Amber and their son were due to return to San Diego, Van Emblem reached out to the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. He reported that his friend and employer, 30-year-old Justin Hammer from Garvin County, had asked for his help in disposing of a body, claiming it was that of Brandon Duran. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation alerted the local sheriff, who immediately visited Hammer's ranch with his assistant. They also contacted Brandon's relatives in San Diego, who informed them that they had been unable to reach Brandon for several days. Once this information was confirmed, the authorities decided not to share the details of the case with Brandon's family. Justin Hammer unexpectedly confessed to killing Brandon Duran when questioned by detectives. However, he claimed it was self-defense, saying that Brandon, a member of a dangerous motorcycle gang, had come to his house on August 7th, kicked in the door, and threatened him. According to Hammer, Brandon was angry about his relationship with Amber and threatened to harm him and his family if he didn't stay away from her. Hammer said he grabbed a nearby shotgun and fired it, killing Brandon. Fearing retaliation from the motorcycle club, Hammer did not call the police and instead hid the evidence. He dismembered Brandon's body in the bathroom using a saw, then put the remains in 5-gallon buckets filled with cement. Hammer needed help loading the heavy buckets into his pickup truck, so he asked his friend Van for assistance. After they loaded the buckets, Van left and reported Hammer to the police. Hammer's ranch had a small pond where he disposed of the buckets after handling the body. He then cleaned the house and later burned the cleaning supplies, gloves, and rags. According to Hammer, he gave Brandon's motorcycle to a relative who unknowingly received the bike and dismantled it for spare parts. The police investigation led to the discovery of 5 buckets at the bottom of the pond. When the officers informed Amber about Brandon's death, she was shocked. She revealed that although she and Brandon were divorced, they had planned to reunite. Amber also confessed to having fought with Brandon the day before his death, following his discovery of her affair with Justin Hammer. This new information prompted the investigators to focus on Amber. She claimed that Brandon left on his motorcycle after their argument, but his family said it was broken. The question arose, if the motorcycle wasn't severely damaged, why would Brandon take it to Oklahoma for repairs instead of fixing it locally? Amber's story about her whereabouts on the day of Brandon's death raised suspicions. She claimed to have a doctor's appointment, but the police couldn't find any records of her visiting a medical facility that day. This meant she had no alibi for the time of Brandon's death. Detectives later found out that Amber had asked a friend to watch her son that day. When the friend arrived at 3 p.m., Amber and Brandon left the house together in Brandon's pickup truck, which had a motorcycle in the back. Amber left her phone behind and didn't return for 8 hours. When she finally came back, Brandon and the motorcycle were no longer with the truck. On Amber's phone, investigators discovered a message from Justin Hammer sent just before she and Brandon left the house, which read, "The ink is ready." The police thought this was a code, indicating that everything was in place to deal with Brandon. After talking to Amber's close friends, detectives learned that she had no interest in getting back together with her ex-husband and often spoke negatively about him. She was bitter about Brandon having full custody of their son and resented him. New evidence emerged that contradicted Amber's account. Forensic analysis confirmed that Amber had written the suspicious note found in Hammer's safe, which listed items necessary for disposing of a body. Furthermore, footage from the local hardware store's CCTV cameras revealed that the crime was premeditated. The footage showed Hammer purchasing buckets and other items from Amber's list the day before Brandon's murder. Despite this, Hammer claimed during his trial that he had acted alone in self-defense, attempting to shield Amber from suspicion. He asserted that the items on the list were actually for home repairs, not for getting rid of the body. Justin Hammer claimed to have used 2 weapons during the crime, holding a shotgun in one hand and a pistol in the other. However, investigators found this statement suspicious and unlikely. The trial, expected to last several weeks, surprisingly ended with the jury deliberating for only an hour and a half. They returned with a recommended sentence of life in prison without parole. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Austin expressed satisfaction with the verdict, stating it was a fitting punishment and brought justice to Brandon Duran's family. She believed the sentence was appropriate. Cindy Ware, Brandon's mother, was overjoyed with the jury's decision and acknowledged that it must have been a difficult one to make. She had been hoping for this outcome for 2 years. In October 2014, Justin Hammer was formally sentenced to life in prison without parole. 2 months later, his wife Amber was arrested and charged with first-degree murder of her ex-husband, desecrating his remains, and conspiracy to commit a felony. Despite pleading not guilty, Amber was denied bail. Amber sat in the courtroom, handcuffed and dressed in a light purple inmate suit, expressing frustration that it had taken 32 months to be reunited with her son. She had only just been allowed to return home to him a month prior, and she was desperate to stay with him until the trial. However, District Judge Jeff Virgin of Norman, Oklahoma, denied her request for bail, agreeing with the prosecution's argument that the seriousness of the allegations against her made her a flight risk. The trial, which began in the spring of 2017, was a long time coming. Over 2 years had passed since Amber was charged. She maintained her innocence, with her lawyers claiming she was not present at the crime scene. Conversely, prosecutors Christy Miller and Jennifer Austin argued that Andrews had the strongest motive to kill Brandon Duran. Miller testified that Amber Andrews was the only person with a motive to want him gone, as she needed him to disappear in order to regain custody of their son. According to Miller, Amber had a strong reason to want him out of the way, and Hammer had a place where the crime could be committed. They thought they had come up with the perfect plan. The prosecutor explained that Amber's motive was to get rid of Duran so she could regain custody of their young son. He pointed out that Amber had been absent from home for 8 hours on the day of Brandon's death, and there was no evidence to support her alibi. The prosecutor suggested that Amber had helped Hammer get rid of the body and clean up the house, neglecting her parental responsibilities in the process. However, the defense attorney Jay Mendros argued that the prosecutor's office had not provided any evidence linking Amber to the crime. He told the jurors that when there is no evidence, the prosecution resorts to attacking Amber's character. According to Mendros, the state's case was based on a theory, but there was no concrete evidence to support it. Mendros claimed that Amber was not capable of planning a murder and that Justin, who was afraid of losing her, had committed the crime. Mendros described the situation as a recipe for disaster, with Duran visiting Oklahoma to rekindle his romance with Amber, while Hammer, who had been Amber's boyfriend for a year, feared losing her to Duran. The defense attorney portrayed the case as a tragic love triangle, where Justin Hammer had a strong motive to kill Brandon Duran, as he was torn between his feelings for Amber and the threat Duran posed. The attorney argued that Amber had been emotionally involved with both men and had oscillated between them, making it difficult to pinpoint her true intentions. The prosecution's case relied on twisted and distorted statements that created a sinister impression in an attempt to imprison someone based on speculation and rumors. The attorney emphasized that, in the American justice system, people are not convicted on assumptions. There must be concrete evidence, and in this case, there was none to suggest that Amber was a co-conspirator or a murderer. Justin Hammer had confessed to the murder, taking full responsibility for the crime. However, during the trial, it was Amber Andrews who was found guilty of the crime. The jurors delivered a guilty verdict after hearing closing arguments, recommending a life sentence for the 35-year-old. Amber appeared in court on June 12, 2017, seemingly in a good mood, awaiting sentencing. Brandon's mother, Cindy Ware, took the stand, overcome with emotion, to share how her son's murder had impacted her and her grandson, Brando. Cindy placed a photo of Duran next to the stand and expressed how Amber had shattered all her dreams. She stated that Brandon's only wish was to be with his family, and Amber had brutally taken that away from him. Cindy sorrowfully reflected on the memories they would never create, such as Brandon teaching Brando how to snowboard and the bright smile that would never again light up a room. Before the judge's final decision, defense attorney Jay Mendros addressed the court once more. He maintained that there was still no concrete evidence linking Amber to the murder and requested that the judge dismiss the jury's guilty verdict and restart the case. Mendros argued that the prosecution's case lacked credible evidence and relied heavily on emotional manipulation to sway the jurors. In essence, the state built a case against Amber based on speculation and gut feelings, rather than concrete proof. The prosecution's strategy was to shock and outrage the jurors, rather than present tangible evidence. As a result, Amber was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the first-degree murder of Brandon Duran, plus additional time for desecrating human remains and conspiring to commit a felony. Meanwhile, Justin Hammer is currently serving his sentence at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Oklahoma, while Amber Andrews is incarcerated at the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center in McLeod, Oklahoma. Brandon Duran has been in the care of the Oklahoma Department of Human Services since August 7, 2012, living with a foster family. In January 2013, Brando was finally allowed to return to San Diego to live with his grandmother, Cindy, after a long and difficult court battle. However, this was not the end of the fight. It took Cindy 5 more years to gain full legal custody of Brando. Once the custody battle was over, Cindy and her relatives sat down with Brando to explain the truth about the verdict and what had happened to his mother. The case of Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak. Matthew Patrick, also known as Matt Pat, was born on June 10, 1975, in Ohio, USA, to Patricia Romano and Leonard Pat. During his high school years, Matthew was an active member of the hockey team. After graduating, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Following his time in the Navy, he landed a job at Phoenix Industrial Finishing, a company owned by his uncle. However, Matthew struggled to get along with his co-workers. According to his sister, Chrissy Duca, some colleagues were jealous of his uncle's influence and resented the fact that Matthew was being groomed to take over the business. As an outdoorsy person, Matthew enjoyed activities like boating, camping, and hunting in his free time. He also participated in softball and hockey games. In 2003, Matthew met his partner, Holly McFeeture, and they started dating soon after. They moved in together in a Cleveland home and began building a life. Friends described Matthew as a happy and settled person who was eager to start a family. Within a year, they welcomed their daughter, Samantha, and 2 years later, their son, Josh. Additionally, Holly's child from a previous relationship also became part of their family. Matthew fell deeply in love with Holly, and his mother, Patricia, said he loved her with all his heart. In a short time, Matthew went from being a bachelor to a father of 3. The early years of their relationship were filled with love, passion, and mutual understanding. However, by 2005, their relationship had become argumentative and strained. Whenever Matthew and Holly had a fight, he would leave home and spend the night at a friend's house. This happened multiple times, and his friends advised him to end the relationship, suspecting that Holly was selfish and had a bad influence on him. Despite their warnings, Matthew never listened and always went back to Holly. Matthew had a life insurance policy that listed Holly as the beneficiary, but his friends cautioned him to remove her from the list. Again, Matthew ignored their advice. Russell Henry, Matthew's best friend, recalled a tumultuous period in Matthew's life. During this time, Matthew's mood would swing wildly, veering from extreme happiness to anger, crying, and fear. Russell understood that Matthew was struggling with depression. Despite being initially thrilled about the prospect of raising his 3 children, Matthew's outlook was overshadowed by the volatile situation at home. Russell urged Matthew to take precautions and remove guns from the house. Later, in 2006, after the hockey season ended, Matthew began gambling online and lost a significant amount of money. His family and friends grew concerned about his well-being and noticed his depression. At their suggestion, Matthew sought medical attention and was prescribed antidepressants. However, by the spring of 2006, Matthew's health began to decline rapidly, prompting Russell to express grave concern about his physical well-being by Memorial Day weekend. Russell had asked Matthew to help him move a motor from one boat to another. However, Matthew, who was once very strong, had since gained weight and was struggling with the task. He was sweating heavily, complaining of back pain, and claimed to have lost his strength. Concerned, Russell advised Matthew to see a doctor and recommended Dr. Thomas Mandat. Matthew scheduled an appointment with Dr. Mandat for July 26, 2006. On the day of the appointment, Matthew phoned Russell to ask for directions to Dr. Mandat's office. During their conversation, Russell overheard Holly yelling at Matthew in the background, telling him he was too stupid to remember where the doctor's office was. The doctor's appointment revealed that Matthew's primary complaint was back pain. After examining him, Dr. Mandat diagnosed Matthew with kidney stones and prescribed medication to help him pass the stones and manage the associated pain. A few days later, on July 30th, Matthew called his father to share that he had bought a fishing rod for his daughter and invited him and Russell to go fishing together soon. Matthew's father said his son was looking forward to a meeting, but later that evening, Matthew attended a party with Russell Henry, who testified that Matthew was in bad physical shape. He had gained weight, was sweating heavily, and had trouble walking due to extreme back pain. After the party, Holly contacted Matthew's father, telling him she had called 911 because something was wrong with his son. The father briefly spoke to Matthew over the phone and found him confused and upset. An ambulance took Matthew to Parma General Hospital, where doctors suspected organ failure. Tests revealed that Matthew's kidneys had failed, and he had metabolic acidosis, a condition in which the blood becomes too acidic. Dr. Mandat, part of the emergency medical team, suspected that Matthew might have ingested a toxic substance like methanol or antifreeze. Holly denied that Matthew had swallowed anything harmful. Tragically, Matthew died the next day, July 31, 2006, due to kidney failure. Dr. Mandat explained that metabolic acidosis is usually caused by respiratory problems, but not in this case. He added that ethylene glycol, a toxic substance found in antifreeze, can also cause metabolic acidosis. Matthew's family and friends were devastated by his death, but Holly showed no emotional response. In fact, her friend Rebecca Vega was surprised by Holly's lack of emotions when they made funeral arrangements together. At the wake, Matthew's father had to ask Holly to enter the room where the casket was, and she seemed unbothered. Russell Henry described her as acting like nothing had happened, almost as if she was at a party. What's more, Holly's actions soon after Matthew's death raised suspicions. The day after his death, she used his bank card to withdraw money from an ATM and wrote checks in his name, emptying his bank account. Her mom reported this activity to the police, leading to Holly's arrest and charges of forgery. Holly agreed to repay the money and was placed on probation for a year. Her family claimed she was trying to get money to care for their children, but it's worth noting that Holly was also a beneficiary of Matthew's life insurance policy, although it was a small amount of $10,000. 2 weeks after Matthew's death, Rebecca Vega visited Holly and was concerned to see cleaning solvents lying around the kitchen, given the young age of the children in the home. Holly was questioned about Matthew's death. She mentioned that one of the items found was antifreeze, which Matthew used to winterize his boat. However, Russell Henry, Matthew's best friend, testified that Matthew hadn't had a working boat since 2004 or 2005 when the engine failed. Michael Jama, a Cleveland police officer, had been friends with Holly since 2002. He would often visit her home, where she would babysit his children, and they would chat over coffee. To avoid interrupting her or any other man, he would call ahead. One day, when he called, Holly told him he didn't need to worry about calling ahead anymore because Matthew had passed away the previous week. Holly discussed Matthew's death in a surprisingly casual tone, mentioning that he had kidney problems and pain from playing hockey. Her casual demeanor came across as insensitive and heartless, Michael recalled. After Matthew's death, Holly removed all of his belongings from the house. She gave his computer to a friend to delete certain content, and then cut up his clothes to make a quilt, leaving his father and brother with no mementos of him. 6 weeks after Matthew's death, Holly began a romantic relationship with Charles Lipham, a police officer from Cleveland. Initially, she told Charles that her ex-boyfriend Matthew had died from kidney failure. However, she later changed her story. When the autopsy results were released in January 2007, they revealed that Matthew's body contained a large amount of ethylene glycol, a key ingredient in antifreeze. After learning this, Holly speculated to Charles that Matthew might have intentionally taken the substance to end his own life. The autopsy report revealed that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the coroner was unable to determine whether his death was intentional or accidental. Holly gave conflicting accounts of Matthew's death to different people, claiming she didn't know what antifreeze was and telling one friend that Matthew died in an industrial accident. She also suggested that a colleague might have poisoned him out of envy. However, Matthew's family suspected that the killer might be someone close to home, citing Holly's apparent lack of emotion at the funeral, despite claiming to have cried in the car beforehand. During their investigation, detectives found 2 bottles of antifreeze in the garage of Holly's home, which was documented in the police report. Holly later started dating Jameson Kennedy, a man with a criminal history and substance abuse issues, but she kept the details of Matthew's death secret from him. One night in September 2008, Holly became emotional while drinking with Jameson and began talking about Matthew, revealing previously undisclosed information. Holly broke down in tears and expressed her desire to escape her problems and leave Cleveland. She revealed her regret over a past event. When Jameson asked what was bothering her, Holly made a shocking confession. She had spiked Matthew's drinks, which eventually led to his death over time. However, Jameson wasn't convinced of her sincerity. He sought the counsel of his lawyer friend, Santiago Feliciano, and shared Holly's admission with him. Santiago advised Jameson to report the information to the authorities if he believed it to be true. Jameson then contacted Holly to discuss her confession, unaware to her that their conversation was being recorded. He hoped she would reiterate her claim about causing Matthew's death, but instead, Holly vehemently denied ever harming him. Holly denied putting anything in Matthew's drink, saying she never mentioned such a thing to Jameson. However, their relationship began to deteriorate as Jameson suspected she had cheated on him. On November 8, 2008, Jameson went to Holly's house to confront her. Feeling scared, Holly called the police. When they arrived, Jameson attacked them and was arrested for assault. He was later found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. After his arrest, Jameson told the police that Holly had confessed to him about her involvement in Matthew's death. This new information led the police to reopen the case, which had stalled since the 2007 autopsy report. The investigation was reinvigorated as more evidence pointed to Holly's involvement in Matthew's death. Dr. Galita conducted the autopsy on Matthew Pat's body. 6 months after the autopsy, Dr. Galita issued a report detailing his findings, which was co-signed by then County Coroner Dr. Elizabeth Balge. The report concluded that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the manner of death remained unknown. Dr. Galita explained that the ingested ethylene glycol entered Matthew's bloodstream and then his liver, where it was rapidly broken down by alcohol dehydrogenase. This process transformed the ethylene glycol into oxalate, which then combined with calcium to form calcium oxalate crystals. Notably, Matthew's kidneys contained an extremely large amount of these crystals. Dr. Galita's testimony revealed that Matthew's flank pain, which started on May 20, 2006, was caused by kidney crystals. During the examination, Dr. Galita found not only kidney damage, but also signs of the kidneys trying to heal. Further examination showed that Matthew had crystals in his heart and brain. Dr. Galita also diagnosed severe acute myocarditis, a heart muscle inflammation that takes at least 3 weeks to develop. Dr. Galita concluded that Matthew's death was a result of prolonged ethylene glycol intoxication, which led to a series of acute events and sublethal poisonings over a period of at least 3 months. Matthew's friends confirmed that his go-to drink was raspberry iced tea, which he would bring to work in a thermos or the original container, often a half or whole gallon jug. One friend, Michael, recalled that Holly McFee would occasionally bring lunch to Matthew, which always included a half or whole gallon container of iced tea. During their investigation, police seized 2 bottles of antifreeze, one Peak brand, one Saturn brand, from Holly's garage in August 2007 after she had moved out. 3 years after the initial autopsy results, the report was revised in 2010. The updated report, signed by Dr. Frank Miller, the county coroner, concluded that Matthew Pat's death was caused by chronic ethylene glycol poisoning and was a homicide. Although the cause of death remained the same, The revised report changed the manner of death from undetermined to homicide. 6 years after Matthew's death, authorities finally decided to take action, charging Holly McFee in July 2012 with aggravated deprivation of Matthew Pat's life. In 2013, Holly pleaded not guilty and faced trial. The prosecution's case relied on circumstantial evidence and featured 15 witnesses, including Matthew's family and friends, his doctor, and police officers who investigated the case. During the trial, witnesses testified about Holly's suspicious behavior, a phone call Matthew made before visiting his doctor, and the fact that Matthew hadn't owned a working boat since 2004, eliminating any need for antifreeze. Meanwhile, Holly's lawyers argued that Matthew's family and friends had prejudged her guilt and pressured law enforcement to pursue charges against her. Holly's legal team claimed that she was not responsible for Matthew's death. They suggested that Matthew was struggling with depression due to his online gambling losses, work issues, and difficulties communicating with his young child, which led him to intentionally ingest a lethal dose of antifreeze. The defense claimed Matthew died from a single dose of antifreeze, not multiple doses over time. They presented Dr. Robert Bucks, who testified that Matthew's death was due to acute poisoning, indicating a single ingestion of ethylene glycol consistent with suicide. Dr. Bucks disagreed with Dr. Galita's myocarditis diagnosis, instead believing Matthew had a heart attack. He added that myocarditis can occur independently of ethylene glycol poisoning, and flank pain isn't a typical symptom. Dr. Bucks claimed kidney stones aren't related to ethylene glycol poisoning, but the state presented contradictory evidence. Matthew struggled with depression, but was committed to being a good father. Jamison Kennedy testified that Holly confessed to mixing something into Matthew's drinks, but Holly denied it. Kennedy's credibility was questionable, but Sergeant Quinn confirmed Kennedy's statement was made when Matthew's cause of death was unknown. The jury delivered a guilty verdict on August 28, 2013, sentencing Holly to life in prison with parole possible after 30 years. The case relied on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony. The case of Jaden Parkinson. Jaden Parkinson was born on September 26, 1996, in Folkestone, UK, as the youngest of 3 siblings in a troubled family. Her parents' relationship was marked by discord. Jaden's mother, Samantha, recounts that her children were exposed to unsettling experiences. When Jaden was just 7 years old, her parents divorced, and she initially lived with her father. Despite this, she maintained a close bond with her mother, with whom she would talk every night over the phone. As Jaden entered her teenage years, her lifestyle became increasingly turbulent. According to Samantha, Jaden's father gave her excessive freedom, which led to her involvement with a crowd that encouraged smoking and alcohol consumption. Jaden would periodically live with her father and then with her mother. At the age of 13, she ran away from home, seeking refuge with her mother and expressing a desire to live with her. Ultimately, the family court ruled in favor of Jaden's wish, allowing her to stay with her mother. Jaden had a difficult time at school, often clashing with teachers and resenting attempts to control her behavior. In her personal life, she was in a romantic relationship with Ben Blakely, whom she met at 14. Despite their significant age difference, Ben was 20, Jaden's mother was unable to intervene. Initially, Jaden and Ben's relationship was loving and romantic, but it gradually became strained and controlling. Ben exerted significant influence over Jaden's life, dictating her appearance, including what clothes she wore and whether she wore makeup. He also isolated her from her family and friends, causing Jaden to move out of her mother's house and into a hostel for women escaping domestic violence. Ben exerted total control over Jaden's life, despite being banned from her hostel. They frequently argued, and the hostel staff were even warned about Ben's aggressive behavior towards her. Jaden was trapped, needing his permission to do anything. Ben took away her phone, convincing her that she only needed him and his love. Ben dictated who Jaden could talk to, forbidding her from interacting with men. He monitored her social media, and she eventually stopped attending school. His grip on her life was so tight that he even restricted her from leaving her room to use the toilet. Jaden's daily phone calls with her mother dwindled to just 1 or 2 conversations per month. Jaden's mother, Samantha, pleaded with her to return home and end the toxic relationship, but Jaden refused. Ben's control over Jaden was both psychological and physical. She was often seen with bruises on her face. On November 30th, 2013, Jaden called her mother to reveal that she was pregnant. Jaden hoped that having a child would change Ben's attitude towards her and his lifestyle for the better. She thought the baby would bring them closer together and that Ben would go back to being the person she fell in love with. However, Ben did not live up to her expectations. Instead, he revealed his true nature once he had complete control over Jaden. He manipulated her into isolating herself from her friends and family, making her financially dependent on him. He even went so far as to restrict her movements, not allowing her to leave her room, even to use the toilet. Meanwhile, Ben was dating other girls behind her back, controlling them psychologically and physically as well. When Jaden's mother, Samantha, found out about her pregnancy, she asked Jaden to come back home, but Jaden refused, not wanting to cause her mother any more trouble. When Jaden told Ben about her pregnancy, he became angry and denied being the father of her child. Before she vanished, Jaden was being threatened by Ben, who claimed he would post intimate photos and videos of her on social media. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Jaden reported Ben to the authorities, fearing he would follow through on his threat. At the time, Ben possessed 30 explicit photos and 13 videos of Jaden, which she desperately wanted to keep private. On December 3rd, Jaden failed to return to her hostel, prompting staff to launch a search. Given their awareness of Jaden's personal issues, they contacted her mother, Samantha, by phone, but she was unable to provide any information about her daughter's whereabouts. A missing persons report was filed with the police just after midnight on December 4th, 2013. After learning about Jaden's tumultuous personal life, investigators reached out to Ben to see if he had any information about her disappearance. However, he was hostile and hung up on them multiple times, claiming he couldn't assist and had no idea where Jaden might be. Jaden had a troubled upbringing and frequently clashed with her family, even running away from home on several occasions. Given this history, her initial disappearance didn't raise immediate red flags during the investigation. On December 4th, police arrested Ben Blakely, but it wasn't related to Jaden's disappearance. Instead, Jaden had previously reported Ben to the police, fearing he would post intimate photos of her online. The investigators who spoke with Ben were unaware that he was also a person of interest in Jaden's disappearance case. After being arrested, Ben denied plans to share Jaden's photos online and was released on bail that same day. Samantha, Jaden's mother, took action by distributing flyers with her daughter's picture and using social media to raise awareness about her disappearance, hoping someone had information about her whereabouts. Meanwhile, the police reviewed surveillance footage to track Jaden's last known movements. They obtained CCTV footage from her hostel, which showed her leaving to meet Ben, but not returning. This was on December 3rd. Further investigation revealed that Jaden was next spotted at Oxford railway station, where CCTV footage captured her walking in with Ben. The footage didn't show anything suspicious. By tracing their journey, investigators discovered that Ben and Jaden took a train to Didcot, a town about 10 miles from Oxford. The last known location of Jaden was at the train station in Didcot, where footage showed her and Ben exiting the building. Jaden would typically reach out to her family within a day or two after running away from home to let them know she was safe. However, this time was different. Despite the passing days, Jaden failed to contact her family or friends, and her social media accounts remained inactive. The CCTV footage showing her boarding a train with Ben made him the prime suspect in her disappearance. The police were convinced that Ben knew Jaden's whereabouts and what had happened to her. The footage also revealed Ben returning to the train station alone, but Jaden was never seen alive again. On December 10, 2013, a week after her disappearance, the police arrested Ben Blakely. The investigators wanted to question Ben to determine what had happened to Jaden after they left the train station in Didcot together. At the time, the police considered two possibilities. Jaden might be hiding, or Ben could be holding her against her will. During the interrogation, Ben was very confident in his responses. He claimed to have no knowledge of his ex-girlfriend Jaden's whereabouts, stating that they had broken up and she had moved on to a new relationship. According to Ben, the police should focus their investigation on her new boyfriend. Ben showed a lack of concern for Jaden's safety, saying he didn't care what happened to her now that they were no longer together and he had a new girlfriend. He suggested that the police check her social media accounts to track her location and identify who she was interacting with. Despite Jaden still being missing, Ben was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and murder. The police then interviewed Jaden's friends to see if they had any information about her possible whereabouts. However, their investigations revealed that Jaden had become estranged from her friends after starting her relationship with Ben, and therefore, no one knew of a potential hideout. A crucial break in the search for Jaden came when a taxi driver from Didcot contacted investigators. He reported that on December 4th, around 1 a.m., he picked up a young man on a dirt road who was struggling with a large, heavy suitcase covered in mud. The passenger needed help lifting the bag into the taxi, which raised the driver's suspicions about its contents and whether he might have unknowingly witnessed a crime. Further investigation revealed that the passenger had called the taxi using Ben Blakely's mobile phone. When police questioned Ben about this new evidence, he refused to answer any more questions. Analysis of his phone's location records showed that Ben had been to several locations in Didcot, including an abandoned barn in the countryside, which became a key area of interest in the case. The team of investigators, comprising criminologists and dog handlers, visited the location where a taxi had picked up Ben that night to conduct an investigation. It was later discovered that Ben and Jaden had previously been to this area, as Jaden's mother resided in Didcot, which is located near the barn. The police discovered a bracelet similar to Jaden's near the barn. Trained service dogs reacted as if they'd found a body inside, but Jaden's body wasn't there. This led the police to suspect that a suitcase, possibly containing Jaden's body, was involved. The police asked the public to come forward if they'd seen a man carrying a large suitcase in the Didcot area. Meanwhile, they conducted door-to-door interviews with nearby residents. Surveillance footage from the train station showed that Ben and Jaden didn't have a suitcase with them. Investigators were determined to find out where Ben got the suitcase, but they also considered the possibility that the man seen with the suitcase by the taxi driver wasn't actually Ben. On December 14th, the police found a crucial lead in their investigation. Ben Blakely's grandmother, grandfather, and younger brother Jake lived near the abandoned barn where the mysterious events unfolded. When the police arrived at their doorstep, Ben's grandmother immediately asked, "Are you here about the suitcase?" The grandmother explained that Ben had borrowed a suitcase from her a few days prior, hurriedly emptying its contents on the floor without explanation. He returned the suitcase 2 days later, but it was dirty. Additionally, she reported that 2 shovels had gone missing and reappeared, covered in a thick layer of dirt. The presence of the dirt-covered shovels raised suspicions that Ben may not have acted alone. Moreover, Jake, Ben's 17-year-old brother, was revealed to be a friend of Jaden's, which hinted at a potential connection between they. Witnesses reported seeing Ben and Jake riding dirt bikes together around the time the police were searching for Jaden. The police arrested Jake Blakely on suspicion of being involved in the crime. They sent the suitcase Ben had returned to his grandmother's barn to a laboratory for analysis to see if it had any traces of Jaden's DNA. Based on the evidence, investigators developed a theory that Jaden was killed in an abandoned barn, then placed in a suitcase and taken to another location where she was buried. However, searching the vast fields surrounding Didcot made finding her body a daunting task. To aid in the investigation, the police used aerial photography to identify 10 areas where the soil surface had recently been disturbed. They checked several locations, but didn't find Jaden's body until they had searched all 10 areas of interest. A significant development occurred in the case when Jake Blakely began cooperating with the police. He directed them to investigate his uncle's grave at a local cemetery in Didcot, near the All Saints Church. Although the cemetery was one of 10 locations that had recently shown signs of surface disturbance, it was initially considered a low priority since such changes are not unusual in a cemetery setting. However, after receiving a note from Jake Blakely suggesting that Jaden's body might be buried in his uncle's grave, the police cordoned off the cemetery. This was a completely new and unprecedented tactic in hiding a victim's body, and it drew widespread media attention. Ben and Jake Blakely's uncle had been buried in 2006, and the forensic team set up a tent in the cemetery to conduct their investigation. After some time, they made the grim discovery. Jaden's body was found in the grave, naked, with no clothes or jewelry present. This was the first time in the country that a victim's body had been hidden in an existing grave. An examination by forensic experts revealed that Jaden was beaten before her death, with evidence of strangulation and finger marks on her neck. The official cause of death was asphyxia, as determined by the pathologist. While in prison awaiting trial, Ben Blakely had a change of heart after speaking with the prison chaplain. He wrote a letter, along with his lawyer, admitting responsibility for Jaden's death. Ben claimed that the crime was not planned, stating that he pushed Jaden during an argument, causing her to fall from a nearby bridge. He attempted to revive her but was unsuccessful. Initially, he buried her body in one location, but later moved it to his uncle's grave in the cemetery. However, the autopsy contradicted his story, showing blunt force injuries to her face and asphyxia as the cause of death. With no signs of a fall from a height, it meant Ben Blakely was dishonest to avoid responsibility for his actions. However, the truth came to light during the trial, which started on June 23, 2014, after Jaden's father had passed away due to heart problems. Blakely showed no remorse for taking the lives of Jaden and her unborn child. Instead, he behaved defiantly, shouting insults and displaying his indifference. Throughout the 4-week trial, it became clear that Blakely was a violent and controlling boyfriend. 3 of his ex-girlfriends testified that he had been abusive to them, taking their phones, hitting them, and choking them if they answered back, or if he suspected them of cheating. Blakely's short temper was on full display during the trial. He frequently outbursted in anger, using foul language in the courtroom and shouting at the prosecutor, Richard Leam. The judge repeatedly warned him about his behavior, but it was too much for Jaden's mother and other family members who were often forced to leave the courtroom in tears. Judge Patrick Eccles was shocked by Ben's behavior, so he sent him to the cells and continued the trial without him for a day. Although Jake Blakely is under 18, Judge Eccles allowed his name to be published because it was in the public's best interest. Jake has admitted to trying to disrupt the legal process, but claimed he thought he was burying weapons or dead animals at the time. Ben promised his sibling Jake an Xbox and £100 to commit the crime. CCTV footage showed Ben and Jaden taking a train to Didcot, then Jake returning alone, hiding his face. The prosecutor said it was a planned crime, with Jake luring Jaden to a secluded spot to kill him. Blakely took Jaden to an abandoned barn in another town after finding out she was pregnant, likely because he wanted to control her and didn't want to become a father. Jaden wanted to start a new life, but Blakely wouldn't let her go. Jaden's mother, Samantha, supported creating a domestic violence registry in an interview with Sky News. She recalled how Blakely manipulated and controlled Jaden, getting money from her, and said she thought she was his target, not Jaden. The jury deliberated for 20 hours before reaching a verdict. Ben Blakely was guilty of intentionally killing Jaden Parkinson. The judge emphasized that Jake Blakely's abusive behavior towards Jaden involved physical and emotional mistreatment during their relationship. Blakely controlled every aspect of Jaden's daily life, taking away her phone to isolate her from others. When she was living at a hostel, he forced her to stay in her room, even restricting her access to the bathroom. The judge pointed out that Jaden was deeply emotionally attached to Blakely, making it challenging for her to break free from the toxic relationship. Finally, in November last year, Jaden found the courage to end the relationship. In response, Blakely threatened to post intimate photos of her online to humiliate her. The court sentenced Jake Blakely to 3 years in prison for attempting to pervert the course of justice in July 2014. His older brother, Ben Blakely, received a life sentence with a minimum term of 20 years. The case of Rebecca Payne. Rebecca Charlotte Payne was born on April 19, 1986, in New Milford, Connecticut, to Virginia and Nicholas Payne. She grew up as an only child and graduated from New Milford High School in 2004, where she was active in sports, playing field hockey, track, and tennis. After high school, Rebecca pursued a degree in athletic training at Northeastern University in Boston. The 5-year program focused on preventing and treating athletic injuries. During her 4th year, she became a leader on campus, serving on the Dean's Council and as president of the athletic training club. Rebecca was known for her friendly and outgoing personality, making it easy for her to connect with people from all walks of life. She was always willing to lend a helping hand, which earned her many friends. Her life was tragically cut short when she was found dead in May 2008. The news shocked her friends and left them wondering who could have committed such a heinous crime. The police investigation revealed that there were no signs of forced entry at her home, suggesting that Rebecca may have known her killer and possibly let them in voluntarily. Rebecca's apartment, situated on the 3rd floor, consisted of 2 bedrooms. One of these rooms was where Rebecca lay face down on the floor, lifeless. The trail of blood leading from the living room to this bedroom suggested that the attack had occurred in the living room. This theory was later confirmed by forensic experts who found casings at the scene and determined that Rebecca had been shot 5 times. The bloodstains in the apartment indicated that Rebecca was initially conscious and managed to crawl to the bedroom, but her strength eventually gave out. The detective's task was to identify the person responsible for such brutality. They quickly ruled out the possibility of a theft gone wrong, as Rebecca's valuables remained untouched. The apartment was in disarray, with scattered belongings. However, the detectives suspected that the perpetrator intentionally created this mess to mislead them. Alternatively, the mess could have been a result of Rebecca's struggle to resist her attacker. During the investigation, officers noticed that both the balcony door and the front door were open. Furthermore, signs in the 2nd bedroom indicated that someone else had lived there. After speaking with the apartment manager, they discovered Rebecca didn't live alone, but shared an apartment with a fellow student. This new information led the police to search for the student. The police also questioned everyone living in Parker Hill Apartments, trying to find any leads. The attack on Rebecca was loud and brutal, with 5 gunshot wounds. It was surprising that many residents heard a woman screaming and gunshots between 3 and 4 a.m., but none of them called the police. This lack of action is known as the bystander effect, or Genovese syndrome, a psychological phenomenon where individuals are less likely to help a victim when others are present. During the police investigation, a first-floor resident reported seeing a black SUV approach the building on the night of the crime, although he couldn't see the license plates or who got out due to the darkness. The apartment complex had security cameras both inside and outside, which may have captured evidence of the crime. Investigating Rebecca's murder, detectives sought CCTV footage from the building to aid their inquiry. They requested the footage from the building manager, but he revealed that the cameras only operated in real time, and recording required a video cassette and manual activation. Unfortunately, no one had recorded the footage. This discovery led investigators to suspect the building manager, who had found Rebecca's body and had unrestricted access to her apartment as a resident of the building. They thought he might have taken advantage of the lack of surveillance to commit the crime, possibly under the cover of darkness. The police explored all avenues, and their suspicions about the manager intensified after a background check revealed his prior issues with the law related to illegal substances. Furthermore, another detail caught the police's attention. During their investigation, the police noticed dark red stains on the front door of the apartment complex manager's apartment. They collected a sample of the stain and sent it to the lab for analysis. Meanwhile, the manager was taken in for questioning at the police station. The investigators asked him numerous questions, trying to determine if he was hiding any information or if his story would change, but he denied any involvement in Rebecca Payne's death. The manager claimed he had spent the entire night in his apartment with his wife, and she corroborated his alibi when questioned by the police. However, the investigation was put on hold until the lab results came back. Once the report confirmed that the stains on the door were just paint, the manager was released due to lack of evidence. While reviewing video and photo evidence from the crime scene, detectives became interested in a specific card used to pay for public transportation in the Boston area. Since each use of the card was recorded in the system, including the location and time of use, the transit police provided the detectives with CCTV footage related to Rebecca's case. After examining the recordings, detectives discovered that the card had been used by Rebecca. Rebecca was walking home, calm and alone, with no one following her, so the initial footage didn't provide any leads in the case. A few days later, investigators obtained another surveillance video from a camera outside the hospital near the Parker Hill apartments. This recording showed a black SUV driving by at the same time as Rebecca's attack, matching the witness's description. Although the footage was poor quality and the license plate was not visible, they were able to identify the car as a Ford. The detectives then brought Rebecca's roommate in for questioning to determine if she had any connection to the incident. The woman was shocked by Rebecca's murder and cooperated with the investigators. She had a solid alibi, having moved in with her parents to study for an exam, which her parents confirmed. Although she was cleared of suspicion, she provided useful information. She revealed that Rebecca's boyfriend, Matt, had access to their apartment. The investigators wondered if Matt had a motive to kill Rebecca and contacted him. Matt claimed he had left Boston to live with his parents in New York State around the time of the attack. Although Matt seemed depressed by his girlfriend's death, the investigators were convinced it was an act. Matt's parents confirmed his alibi, but a phone record showed Matt had spoken to Rebecca on the phone around midnight, just hours before her death. But the investigation into Rebecca's murder hit a dead end after Matt was cleared due to cell tower evidence, placing him at his parents' house in New York State at the time of the crime. Years went by with no leads, leaving Rebecca's parents without answers about their daughter's tragic death. However, a breakthrough came in 2012 when the Boston police arrested Anthony White on drug trafficking charges. With a long prison sentence looming, White offered a deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he would reveal crucial details about the night Rebecca died. The investigators saw this as a potential break in the long-dormant case, and agreed to the deal. After discussing it with the prosecutor, White recounted that on May 20th, 2008, he received a call from Cornell Smith, a fellow drug dealer and acquaintance. Smith wanted to meet up and arrived at the designated location with their mutual friend Michael Balba, who was driving a black SUV. The three of them drove to the Parker Hill Apartments, where Balba parked in a spot with a clear view of the apartments. According to White, when Cornell Smith spotted Rebecca through a third-floor window, he exclaimed, "That's her." They waited for a while, watching until the lights in Rebecca's apartment went out, indicating she had likely fallen asleep. Under the cover of darkness, Smith proceeded to climb from the first-floor balcony to the second and finally to the third, where he entered through the open balcony door. Rebecca was not asleep, but rather lying on the couch in the living room when she encountered the intruder. She began screaming, and a brief struggle followed. Cornell Smith then fired 5 shots at her before fleeing the apartment through the front door and driving away. Investigators were skeptical of White's account, suspecting that he fabricated the story based on news reports to secure a lighter prison sentence. The officers were baffled by the motive behind the murder. Why would Cornell Smith kill Rebecca, who was unrelated to his world? But White's next statement shocked and disturbed them. According to White, Rebecca's death was a case of mistaken identity. On the first floor of the Parker Hill Apartments lived 2 sisters who resembled Rebecca. These sisters, who were also illegal drug dealers, were Smith's rivals. In 2012, Cornell Smith was already serving a 12-year prison sentence for selling drugs, which he had been convicted of 2 years prior. Following White's testimony, Cornell Smith was also charged with Rebecca's murder, but he denied any involvement. Before Cornell Smith's court appearance, prosecutors were dealt a devastating blow. Their key witness, Anthony White, had died in prison. Without White's testimony, the case against Smith was in trouble, as there was no physical evidence linking him to Rebecca Payne's apartment. However, investigators had another lead, Michael Balba, who was in the car with White and Smith on the night of the crime. Detectives located Balba and discovered that he owned a black Ford Expedition SUV, which matched the vehicle caught on surveillance camera and the witness's description. Balba was arrested and taken into custody, but he denied any involvement in the case and requested a lawyer. Despite having no concrete evidence against him, investigators hoped that Balba's connection to the crime could still lead to justice for Rebecca. Investigators examined his court file related to drug trafficking. What they found was astonishing. Smith had written several letters to the judge presiding over his trial, and one of them implicated him in Rebecca's murder. In the letters, Smith portrayed himself as superior to others. Although some of the content was nonsensical, one letter stood out as crucial evidence. In it, Smith wrote about an altercation that had taken place in downtown Boston, which ultimately led to Rebecca Payne's tragic death at his hands, a fact he boldly admitted to, stating, "I, Cornell Allen Smith Sr., was responsible." It's unclear why these letters hadn't raised red flags earlier, especially since they were addressed to the judge. The letter proved that Cornell Smith was in Rebecca Payne's apartment at the time of her murder. The trial took place in 2015. Throughout the trial, the district attorney emphasized that Rebecca was an innocent victim with no connection to Smith or his accomplice, Balba. Payne expressed frustration and sadness, saying that seeing Cornell Smith, the person responsible for his daughter Rebecca's death, is a painful reminder of the tragedy and hinders their ability to move forward. Despite Smith's guilty plea and 18 to 20-year prison sentence, Payne emphasizes that nothing can change the fact that Rebecca is gone forever. The judge ordered Smith to face Rebecca's loved ones, acknowledging the immense pain he caused. Her hometown dedicated a tennis court, garden, and scholarship fund in her name to keep her memory alive. The case of Amanda Anderson. Amanda Anderson was born on October 10, 1990, in Fridley, Minnesota, to Mark and Stacy Kennedy Anderson. Amanda grew up to be an aspiring writer with a passion for words, music, and life. She graduated with honors from the Tyler Gospel Chapel School in 2009 and worked at Trinity Mother Frances while attending Tyler Junior College, where she majored in English literature. On September 15, 2010, 15-year-old Nate Anderson found his sister Amanda dead on the floor with multiple bullet holes in her head after returning from a jog. He had gone out to clear his head while doing homework, but became stressed and returned to find the door kicked open. Nate immediately called 911, describing the scene without touching anything. When investigators arrived, Nate recounted the events, still shaken. The investigation revealed that Amanda was shot while sitting on her bed, causing her to fall to the floor. The killer removed shell casings, suggesting a revolver was used. Amanda's death was devastating to her parents, who were deeply religious and couldn't comprehend who would commit such a heinous act. Their daughter had just graduated from high school and was trying to find her way in life. She had no enemies and wished no one harm. The investigators canvassed the neighborhood where the crime took place, speaking with residents to gather information about Amanda and her family. Uniformly, the people they interviewed described the Andersons as a tight-knit, religious family. One neighbor offered a possible theory about Amanda's fate. He pointed out that the area was previously crime-free, but 2 weeks before Amanda's death, a house in the neighborhood was robbed. It's possible that the same person was involved in Amanda's murder. The neighbor suggested that the perpetrator might have seen Amanda's brother, Nate, go for a run, then broken into their house. If Amanda witnessed the break-in, the robber might have shot her to silence her. To explore this theory, the investigators needed evidence to determine whether a botched robbery led to Amanda's death. Typically, burglars who are caught by homeowners will go to great lengths to prevent them from calling the police. However, in this case, nothing was taken from the Anderson home, and Amanda's room was left undisturbed. Amanda's home was burgled, but the thief didn't take anything valuable, including jewelry and a laptop. Amanda's father, Mark, checked the house and confirmed that nothing was missing. This led the investigators to question whether the break-in was actually a robbery gone wrong. The forensic team searched Amanda's room and the entire house for evidence, collecting fingerprints and hair samples that didn't belong to Amanda or her family. They also took the clothes Nate wore when he found Amanda's body, even though they didn't have any visible bloodstains. This was consistent with Nate's 911 call, in which he said he hadn't touched anything. The police still sent the clothes to the lab for further analysis, along with other evidence. To begin their investigation, the police first had to rule out Amanda's family members as potential suspects. They asked her father, Mark Anderson, to show them all the weapons in their house, which was a common practice in Texas. Although the Andersons weren't avid hunters, they did occasionally practice shooting. Following Mark's directions, the police found and seized over 10 different types of pistols, rifles, and revolvers from the house. With no clear motives or suspects, the police explored the possibility of criminal gang involvement, but they quickly dismissed it. Their informants also didn't provide any useful information. 2 days after her death, on September 17, 2010, the police received the autopsy report, which revealed that Amanda had been shot 4 times in the head. What was especially puzzling was that every shot would have been fatal. Yet, the perpetrator had continued to pull the trigger 3 more times. The unusual location and direction of the bullet wounds on Amanda's head raised suspicions. The attacker used a small caliber pistol, firing from a distance of at least a yard away, as there were no gunpowder marks around the wounds. 2 wounds were located on top of her head, one near the right temple and one on her forehead, with all shots entering from top to bottom, except for one shot to the right temple that entered at a right angle. This suggested a deliberate and controlled attack, more like an execution. Forensic analysis led investigators to believe that Amanda knew her killer. They based this conclusion on two key facts. Firstly, Amanda was sitting on her bed, occupied with her laptop, when she was shot, indicating that she felt comfortable and safe in the presence of the attacker. Secondly, the fact that the attacker was standing next to her suggests a level of familiarity and intimacy. If Amanda had not known the person, she would likely have reacted or taken action when they entered her room, but she did not, implying that she trusted the perpetrator and did not anticipate the attack. Detectives investigating Amanda's death questioned her college friends, learning she was cautious and avoided strangers, drugs, and criminals. Her best friend confirmed she had no enemies on campus. Despite this, they considered that someone might have secretly targeted her. Reviewing college security footage and reports from the past year, they searched for suspicious incidents but found nothing useful. The police revisited the Anderson family to inquire about Amanda's personal life, suspecting a personal motive behind the brutal crime due to the multiple wounds. Amanda's mother was baffled by the incident, describing her daughter as a kind and diligent student who regularly attended church. Although Amanda didn't have a boyfriend at the time of her death, her mother revealed that she had met someone about a year prior, but their relationship ended. The police sought out this individual to learn more about his connection with Amanda and the reasons behind their breakup. Upon questioning, the man revealed that he and Amanda shared some classes and occasionally went to the movies with friends, but they never developed a romantic relationship. They had gone out together a few times, but it didn't progress further. When asked about the last time he saw Amanda, he stated that it was the day before her murder. The police started their investigation again from the beginning, re-examining all the evidence. They focused on Nate's 911 call, which was the starting point of the case. During the call, Nate claimed he didn't enter his sister's room and that someone had shot Amanda. The investigators realized it was impossible for someone standing in the doorway to know Amanda was shot in the head, or how many times, without entering the room. The police revisited the Anderson house and inspected the door, which Nate said was opened when he got home. Although there were scratches on the door, the lock was intact, leading the police to believe someone was trying to make it look like the door was kicked in. The crime lab analyzed the weapons found in the Anderson house and concluded that one of the pistols was likely the weapon used to shoot Amanda. After a thorough investigation, detectives reached a conclusion. All evidence pointed to a family member as Amanda's killer. The murder weapon, a pistol, was hidden in a secure location, suggesting the killer knew exactly where to find it. Moreover, the killer returned the gun to its hiding place after the crime. On the night of the murder, Amanda's parents had solid alibis. Her father was dining with a friend, and her mother was at work. This left only Amanda and her 15-year-old brother Nate in the house. To find answers, investigators delved deeper into the events of that evening. It turned out that Amanda's father, Mark, had called her to remind her to pick up her mother from work. 12 minutes later, Mark received a call from Nate, who was crying and claimed someone had shot Amanda. However, this call raised a disturbing question. Why did Nate call his father before calling emergency services, unless he was trying to cover his tracks after murdering his own sister? The police required solid proof before making any accusations, as they didn't want to cause further distress to Amanda and Nate's parents. To gather more information, the investigators decided to question Mark Anderson, Nate's father, without directly accusing his son of involvement. During the conversation, Nate's parents became aware that the police suspected their son. When asked about Nate's recent use of the .22 caliber pistol, Mark revealed that he had given the gun to Nate a few days before Amanda's death, and that Nate had fired it in their backyard. The officers went back to the Anderson house and found .22 caliber casings in the backyard that matched the bullets found in Amanda's body. While this was suspicious, it wasn't conclusive evidence. However, 2 weeks later, a crucial clue was found. Nate's clothes, which he wore when he claimed to have found his sister dead, were tested with luminol, revealing traces of blood. Further analysis by a national blood spatter expert suggested that Nate was either in the room when the shooting occurred or was the one who fired the fatal shots. The tests confirmed that his clothes had Amanda's blood on them. Despite this, the Anderson siblings seemed to have a loving relationship. Photos showed them being affectionate, and their parents described them as best friends who often made videos together, including one just days before Amanda's death. The police were left wondering what could have driven Nate to commit such a heinous act. On November 10, 2010, police arrested Nate Anderson at a church, suspecting him of murdering his own sister. The accusation shocked everyone who knew him, as it seemed out of character. The trial began on October 24, 2011, and was an emotionally challenge for the Anderson family. Despite the evidence presented against Nate, his family remains supportive and refuses to believe he is capable of such a crime. According to his grandmother, Dolores Anderson, Nate is a kind and innocent boy who would never harm his sister. His parents, too, are adamant that he is not responsible for Amanda's death. For his mother, Stacy Anderson, the whole ordeal has been a nightmare. She is still adjusting to the loss of her daughter and now has to cope with her son's arrest. Mark expressed his outrage and disbelief at the accusation that his son killed his sister Amanda. The brutality of the crime, including the fact that Amanda was shot 4 times, has led Mark to conclude that Nate could not have committed the crime. Initially, Mark had some doubts about Nate's involvement, but once he learned about the 4 gunshots, he became convinced of his son's innocence. Mark is critical of the authorities, accusing them of ignoring evidence that exonerates Nate and instead focusing on evidence that supports their own case. He feels that they have already made up their minds about Nate's guilt, despite the fact that an expert had recommended that Nate be tried in juvenile court, not adult court. After Amanda's death, investigators found evidence in the Anderson home that shed light on the case. Prosecutors discovered that Nate's computer had a history of visits to adult websites and violent drawings. Furthermore, a text message on Amanda's phone mentioned someone should be shot, but the context indicated it was a joke about Nate not helping with chores and playfully shooting staples at Amanda. An expert testified that this evidence could be a motive for the crime. However, Nate's attorney argued that the evidence was not unusual or incriminating. Ultimately, Nate accepted a plea deal in February 2012 and pleaded guilty to a first-degree crime. He confessed to a psychologist and his parents that he had killed Amanda. In a statement, Nate and Amanda's parents shared Nate's confession. According to Mark Anderson, Nate told him that he shot Amanda with a pistol found in their home and asked for forgiveness, which he granted. Stacy, the mother, expressed the immense difficulty she experienced as a mother who loves both her children. Nate Anderson has been sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. His attorney believes that agreeing to the plea deal was in Nate's best interest, as neither Nate nor his family wanted the case to go to trial. Regarding the motive behind the crime, Nate's attorneys declined to provide details, saying only that they know what happened and are choosing not to discuss it further. However, they did reveal that Nate has shown remorse for his actions, has asked for forgiveness, and has received it. The attorneys described the process of coming to terms with what happened as difficult and emotional. The authorities have determined that the incident was a hate crime, as there was no evidence of any other trauma. According to the Smith County Sheriff's Office, Nate will be eligible to apply for parole in 2 years.